Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, we're missing it. We'll get started, and Councillor Freeman and Bodley will be on, or are here, but just stepped out for a minute. So I will begin with a territorial acknowledgement for Indigenous Heritage Month. So we would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we are gathered and broadcasting from today is the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral peoples. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. June is Indigenous History Month, an opportunity for the citizens of Waterloo to learn about the unique cultures, traditions, and experiences carried by the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples who call this area home. It is a time to honor stories, achievements, and resilience of Indigenous people who have lived on this land since time immemorial and whose presence continues to impact the evolution of Canada. There are many people and achievements to celebrate and much work to do to address harm experienced by Indigenous communities. This means working diligently on the recommendations in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls report, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action, and reporting progress to the community. This is vital to building and improving the strained and/or missing relationships between settler and Indigenous peoples. As a council, we acknowledge that the history of the original inhabitants of this region has not been fully told. This upcoming month is an opportunity to change that. Together, we can learn the many local traditions and oral history of storytelling from Indigenous voices, music, and art from Indigenous artists or Indigenous neighbors living, working, and playing in this community. Through action, we can create positive changes to the colonial systems that prevent Indigenous peoples from feeling fully welcomed, embraced, and celebrated. So at the beginning of this council meeting, we pause to think about the needs of our community. May we show wisdom and compassion in all our decisions. And for the moment of reflection today, the council statement is with respect to Pride Month. Thursday, June 1st, also marks the beginning of Pride Month, a celebration of diverse individuals in 2S LGBTQ+ communities. There are numerous upcoming events where folks from these communities and their allies will celebrate the progress achieved through the same basic human rights as those held or enjoyed by straight, cisgendered people. It is also a time to acknowledge the ongoing and escalating harm faced by these communities because of homophobia and transphobia that are so closely connected to colonization. We are, however, only discovering a fraction of these violent incidents as fear stemming from equal rights and representation prevents reporting. This is true amongst many or all communities protected by the Ontario Human Rights Commission. Solidarity for the rights of all gender identities and sexual orientations and resistance to violence are integral to addressing harm experienced locally and around the world. As a city, we acknowledge the work of support organizations that also make significant efforts to educate the community. We challenge their efforts by uplifting voices, we champion their efforts by uplifting voices in the development of our new strategic plan, and we challenge systems and institutions across the region to do the same, collectively acknowledging there is always more work to do. This year, let's celebrate the contributions and take action alongside our 2S LGBTQ+ friends, family, and neighbors. So council asking if anyone has a disclosure of pecuniary interest and the nature of that, if there is one. Seeing none. When looking for to approve the minutes. Do I need a mover and a seconder to approve the minutes of the April 24th, 2003 council meeting? Moved by Councillor Vasek and seconded by Councillor Bodley. All in favor? That is unanimous. So we are on to item 7, staff reports. And the first report is the City of Waterloo Comprehensive Engineering and Landscape Manual. And we have Kyle Bossy, okay, if I'm saying that right, Kyle Bossy and some other staff members who have, thank you for the report that you've prepared, and Kyle has a presentation for us, so I'll turn it over to you. Welcome, Kyle.
Thank you very much. Through you, Chair. My name, as you mentioned, is Kyle Bossy, and I'm here to present to you the City of Waterloo's Comprehensive Engineering and Landscape Manual, or CELM for short. The document was prepared by the CELM Steering Committee. This group is made up of staff from the Engineering Services Division of IPPW, most of whom are here with me today. This work was completed under the leadership of Ron Ormson, the Commissioner of IPPW, and Francis Reyes, the Director of Engineering Services. The Steering Committee includes Michael Stewart, Jeremy McCullough, Daniela Giovanato, Emily Brown, and myself. In today's presentation, we're just going to discuss the background, purpose, consultation efforts, and the next steps for this manual. So for background, city processes and standards are always changing to meet industry needs. For engineering and landscape disciplines, the projects are becoming more complex and multidisciplinary as we shift away from greenfield work and into more higher density infills and more complex municipal capital projects. External bodies like the province can affect change as well, such as through new excess soil regulations and bills like Bill 23. To meet these increasing demands, we took on the task to update our existing standards and combine multiple documents all into a single manual. Through this, we aimed to formalize existing city standards and processes, leverage and strengthen connectivity and continuity between engineering and landscape architecture disciplines, to provide guidance for municipal capital projects like road reconstructions and public space projects, to promote climate resilient designs and equitable access to infrastructure, and to formulate the document in a way that allows for future expansion and inclusion of other related city standards documents. It's a little wordy, but this slide just kind of depicts visually what the end result is, being going from multiple standards documents all housed in individual locations into a single comprehensive document organized by a series of volumes. The work we did took the 2003 Development Engineering Manual and the 2008 Landscape Design Process and Requirements Manual and combined them along with our capital project design standards and processes into the CELM that we're presenting here today. We believe this format allows for increased clarity on our requirements as a city, improved user friendliness, and for easy integration of other city documents of a similar nature as may be required in the future. This update was significant, and it was done with a high level of consultation within the industry. Internally, we consulted with the impacted departments, including engineering, city utilities, transportation, planning, and parks and forestry. We also reached out externally to our industry partners through various channels, including our local consultant engineers, landscape architects, and contractors. Obtaining Council's approval here today is a major milestone for this project, but it is by no means the finish line. there's still a lot of work to be done. And we've kind of outlined what our next steps are as far as we see them today. So upon Council's approval, we would publish the CELM as an IPPW policy document. We would then work to develop robust and documented processes for future updates and periodic archival of the manual for informational purposes. We would convert the manual to an online-only format, targeting the first quarter of 2024. This would improve accessibility of the information, improve use and access for industry practitioners and the public, and would improve connectivity to other city documents such as our bylaws and policies that are also on our website. We would also look to implement periodic updates to the manual as necessary to the satisfaction of the city's Director of Engineering. That's all we have for you today. We look forward to your support on this important IPPW document, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Kyle, and to the others who contributed to this report. So turn to council see if anyone has questions. Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I'm just wondering how harmonized this is with City of Kitchener and kind of where it sits in our local constellation of communities in terms of, guidance document, just because there's so many contractors working across the whole region.
Certainly, through you, Mayor. So this is a standalone City of Waterloo standards document. However, there are other standards that tie in many of our regional partners like City of Kitchener, the region itself, Cambridge. So this manual, while it focuses on the City of Waterloo's specific standards and requirements, it also leverages and references many of those documents like the DGSSMS and provincial standards, federal standards. So it ties in that way, if that answers your question.
Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Wright?
Yes, actually I do. I also, through you, Mayor, I went and looked at, of course, Volume 6, Stormwater. And so I'm just curious, we have the 100-year storm in there as a reference point, and certainly we're referencing intensity, duration, frequency. I'm just wondering how we're factoring in extreme precipitation and whether we're creating, more forward-thinking guidelines around permeability.
Through you, Mayor. That's a great question, and we have thought about these items. So our IDF curves, intensity, duration, frequency curves, have been reviewed by a University of Waterloo professor in the context that you were speaking about. And so they have been deemed satisfactory for looking forward for the design of our city. As far as infiltration policy, we have a stormwater master plan, which is our guiding document for infiltration. And so it'll change depending on where you are in the city. Some watershed studies have been done in the area, but it's all referenced within that document.
Thank you so much. That's all I had. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, other questions? Seeing it. I just had a couple of questions, more clarification. I was curious about the groups that you're consulting with and wondered about if you also have engaged some of our local or, non-local, but environmental groups, and then groups like GRAC, like Grand River Accessibility. So I always forget what the second A is. Grand River Advisory, yeah, the Committee for Accessibility, or because we were, what was it, a month ago, we were talking about accessibility standards of and things like that we need to be aware of, but certainly environmental issues similar to what Councillor Wright had brought up. So were they included? I didn't see them listed as some of the groups that were consulted in the creation of this.
Yes, thank you for the question. So many of our standards, when it comes to engineering standards and standards for active transportation, which sidewalks and everything, these are all, sorry, for context, this standard is not for buildings. These standards are for external roads and parks and the like, so this is in that context. The standards we reference are for the, why am I blanking on this? AODA, thank you. The AODA standards, so the Accessibilities for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, which is the governing legislation. So we do kind of refer to those standards. Locally, we have not reached out specifically to GRAC and the like for this manual, more because that work has been done through kind of a multitude of other channels as we've created these engineering standards and landscape architecture standards. So with that in mind, that isn't to say that in future updates, that if there are issues that we see, improvements to be made, they could certainly be consulted and brought in to review the standards and help us improve any gaps that we may have.
Thank you. And sorry, how often are these updates made?
Currently, what we're targeting moving forward is annual changes. This isn't something set in stone at this point. This is a target that we're anticipating as a reasonable frequency for updates. That's a similar update frequency as the DGS SMS standards mentioned earlier, which is our regional servicing standards document. And it allows for our consultants to work with a certain set of standards for a year, and rather than updating it on the go all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess, and I know you, Councillor Hanmer has a question. I guess I'm just concerned that sometimes it feels like, in my mind, those things should be embedded into it, right? Like when you're consulting with broadly with others in the community, that accessible groups that are like GRAC or other groups that represent people with a variety of disabilities, and environmental groups, particularly given what you're talking about, should be part of that as well. So I certainly would have liked to have seen that in there. Did you want to respond to that, Director? Okay, because I don't know, Councillor Hanmer, if you had a question similar to that at all, or? Okay, do you want her to? Okay, go ahead then, Mr. Reyes.
Thanks, through you, Chair. This document is a general guidance document, and however, it does not preclude us from reaching out to those different groups for each specific projects. It's hard to bring them in at this point without any specific projects and constraints. So that touch point would still happen once we get to the project stage moving forward.
Okay, thanks for that. But I guess it's the term standards. Like if you're setting standards, I would have thought that, beyond including them in the projects, specific projects, that it's like when you're setting standards, that those are people that would have some important input at that process.
Through you, Chair. The other piece as well that I wanted to flag is that, as Mr. Bossy mentioned, that some of the other documents that have been vetted through GRAC, so for example, the Transportation Master Plan document that provides guidance in terms of accessibility outdoors, is referred to in the document. So we've referred multiple documents that have been vetted through GRAC and the different groups as well. We just wanted to sort of avoid some of the duplication of efforts so that we're not repeating information that's already provided in other city documents.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you, Mayor, through you, and we're not going to let it go yet, quite yet. It would be, just to make a suggestion, these groups we are asking to respond to particular projects as they get going. And I think because we've done such a lot of work, and it looks great, I love it that it's all together in one document, just even from an information standpoint, to let the groups know that the document has come together, they will have input in the projects as they go forward, and even showing them how their input on some of the specific documents you refer to would be helpful to keep it going. We've learned through GRAC over the last year, not so much on these things, that it would have been helpful to have the input up front, because not just the city of Waterloo, but other cities are having to redo things because of input that they finally got from GRAC. So I think if you could close the loop and just as an information at one of their meetings, it probably would go a long way and be very well received. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanmer. I didn't know if you wanted to respond to that, either of you, or it's okay if you don't. No? Okay. Yeah, I think that you've said that much more eloquently than I was, Councillor Hanmer. So thank you very much. I think that would be really appropriate because we have heard at different times that that sometimes their input is seen more as optional, not as actual things that like recommendations to take forward. So I think that's really critical. Any other questions or comments from council? No, seeing none. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I know. Just hold on a second. So yes, we need a motion. There's 4 recommendations. Yeah, 4 recommendations. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder to not take. I'm not taking it from. Just joking. Moved by Councillor Bodley and seconded by Councillor Hanmer. All in favor of these recommendations. That is unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay. Okay, moving right along. Thank you very much, staff, for that report and for that information. It's very helpful. Okay, moving along, we're at the Laurel Greenway Master Plan, and Emily Brown is with us. And now there was to have been a presentation today, Council, but unfortunately, the representative from Shift Landscape Architecture is, I think, unwell, was what I'd heard. So unfortunately, there's no presentation, but we have Emily. Emily, did you want to provide some remarks or some context to it?
Hi, through you, Chair. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. Yeah, I guess I was just going to say what you just said, that there's a bit of a change of plans. So no presentation today, but I do have a bit of a project overview I'll just quickly go through for a bit of context. So as you know, my name is Emily Brown. I'm the Public Realm Specialist with the City of Waterloo, and I'm the city's project manager for the Laurel Greenway Master Plan. As the urban core intensifies and more people call Uptown Waterloo home, finding ways to create and improve our public space is more important than ever. We all know this. Council adopted the Uptown Public Realm Strategy in 2019, which looks at the spaces between the buildings, the public realm. The Laurel Greenway project started as a priority initiative from this strategy. And while the idea of the Laurel Greenway was previously endorsed, further input and feedback specific to the project was valuable in guiding the process and direction of this master plan. The concept sees the Laurel Greenway as a nearly 2-kilometer-long linear park through Uptown Waterloo. We want to give people a continuous, lively experience that's user-friendly, supports nature, highlights local heritage, and responds to the needs of the community. We also want to promote sustainability and active transportation. We want to give people a place to go and a way to get in and around the city in a safe and enjoyable way. It's really a unique project in that it takes a series of spaces with different goals and different site conditions and connects them to create one overall continuous Laurel Greenway. Today, we're bringing forward the Laurel Greenway Master Plan, which outlines the overall concept and provides a sequence to implementing the Greenway. The overall vision is broken out into short, medium, and long-term projects. And overall, the Laurel Greenway will shape this part of Waterloo for many years to come. We're so excited about the project and see it as a really great opportunity for Uptown Waterloo. So I'll do my best to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Emily. And I have to say, reading through it, it looks like a phenomenal vision that you've created through this. So I will turn it to council. So thank you for that, to everyone involved with that. It looks like a really great opportunity for us. So questions? I see Councillor Wright.
I am so excited about this plan. So first of all, just want to put that on the table, and I just want to state how important I think it is as we're beginning and continuing this work of intensifying our uptown. the park aspect, the greenway aspect is incredibly important. And I know some of you this morning saw a news story circulate from the Record just about the health benefits of park space to communities, and the return on investment is just so important at this point in time. So I just want to acknowledge that. I do hope that there's continued opportunities for optimization on this plan. There's two spots that in particular sort of come up over and over and over again. And one is, we have this trailhead project at Brighton, adjacent to Brighton Park. And with this intensification that is happening in Uptown, especially what may be coming along Bridgeport Road in particular, creating a very intentional link to expanded green space there will be very, very important. And so just wanting to see Brighton Park make its way into that Laurel Greenway plan. And then the other spot that completely drives me nuts is that we've cut ourselves off from Moses Springer, and that crossing Weber Street has become such a burden that it is so dangerous. It's so misaligned. The infrastructure is getting in the way of the trail continuity. It doesn't connect to the Waterloo Loop, and it further doesn't then connect to the University Gateway. And so that's a huge missed opportunity if we don't try to optimize it in this plan. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. So did you have a question? Like,
Well, the question would be like the optimization of the plan, the continued optimization of the plan.
Through you, Chair. Okay, that was a lot of good points. I was scribbling. I'm sure you saw that. The link from Brighton Park through to potentially the Bridgeport area is definitely on the radar. The plan can be optimized in the future. This is really just a high level sort of starting point that we'll have to jump off of, right? So we can do different studies. We'll have to do different studies as projects move forward, and through detailed design, all of these kind of important ideas can definitely be explored. So thank you.
Thank you, Emily. And yeah, I shared those were some of my questions. We're going to be about crossing Weber Street, but I know we have had we're going to have some discussions with the region around that as well. So anyway, Councillor Freeman.
That is the question. Like, what is the relationship between this plan and the region? Because obviously that Bridgeport crossing or Weber Street crossing is not the only crossing. There's also the crossing on Bridgeport and Herb that are pretty critical to this greenway. And we didn't have good traction with the region when they put that piece of infrastructure in on Weber Street when it happened. And so I'd like to know what tools that we have to actually, has the region seen this? Have they accepted it? How do we move this forward with regard to continued regional investment in infrastructure that's critical to this master plan?
Through you, Mayor. Very good questions. We have engaged with the region, and we've had discussions about these particular crossings. We all kind of know their roadblocks, really. So our plan now is, overall, we've got this general guide of short, medium, long-term projects. And as either funding's available or partnership opportunities are available, for example, when, there's reconstruction on a road, we'll join together and work toward improving those crossings. So we have had those conversations, and yeah, they're aware and had input on the designs of the crossings and whatnot. So,
just as an aside, that Weaver Street crossing is now even worse because the private landowner has put curb across their driveway. So it's even worse than it was.
Yeah, I was trying to cross it actually on an e-bike just a couple hours ago, and it's not a lot of fun on the Weaver crossing one, but yeah, and the region is looking at redoing Bridgeport and Herb Street, so it'll be critical to make sure that there's safe crossings there. Councillor Vasek.
Thanks, through you, Mayor, thanks. This is super exciting. It's a regular route for me and my family, so it's nice to see also that it'll be activated. Yeah, here to the comments about the Weber Street crossing, also the bane of mine and many people's existence, but sounds like I know everyone's thinking about it. And this is not a question, but Chris, maybe you could, probably this might be your response, but I want to take us just a little further into Moses Springer Park, even though it's not technically part of this, but so interconnected. If you could give a status update on the lighting. So is there any status update on, but if you could, I'm asking this really on behalf of my constituents. And so I'd like to know if you have any updates about if there will be lighting in Moses Springer, if you've done the prioritization yet, and when we might be able to have some more information in.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Vasek. Basically, we are still trying to finalise our trail lighting criteria because it's essentially a retrofit program. So we'd like to try and finalise that criteria so that we can put different sections of trails around the city into that matrix to see where the cards fall. We get a lot of requests, so we've got to make sure that we're dealing with the right priorities first. But it's definitely on our radar, and we hope to be getting to that very shortly, and then start to implement those priorities. Once we know what those are.
Great, thank you. That's all I'm looking for. Yeah, and then for you, Emily, my question would be: is that part of the consideration? Even though your project is the Laurel Greenway, is extending your thinking beyond the intersection there part of your overarching vision too?
I think in general it makes sense to have continuity. Yes, I do like the Laurel Greenway it has a boundary, and that's kind of my focus here. So it's a little bit difficult to kind of look beyond. We have lots of conversations internally, and these things are on our mind as well. So they're not kind of lost in when a project boundary ends. They're not lost. So we'll keep those conversations going.
Thanks so much, both of you.
Thanks, Councillor Vasek. Other comments or questions from? Okay, I just had a couple, but feel free, Council, to let me know if you have any more questions. So, accessibility. Just wondered. I know this is a high-level document, but if like GRAC or some other, Amy Ross or maybe other people who represent the accessibility community, if they've been consulted as part of this process.
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, the specific groups like that have not. Similarly, we've done, using all the AODA guidelines and whatnot, and there will be chance in the future. So I heard the comments on the previous one about early on is important. So we've heard that now, and that's really good to know. But there will be chance in the future for additional input. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think that like youth and BIA, and I mean, I love all the references to like potential arts and culture activation opportunities along the trail, but I think that accessibility, and particularly with the wayfinding, to really get input from people with accessibility challenges, right? Whether it's QR codes or audio cues or whatever, like a mix of it, so people can really tell where they're going. I think that that would be really important. I'm just curious because and again, maybe this is too in the weeds, but when you're talking about the wayfinding, like Cycle WR and Zeitspace have created a bike trail app. I don't know exactly, I forget what it's called, but just if you could, if there's a way to include some of those community assets in it, because they've already put quite a bit of work into that wayfinding piece for trails and cycling, I think it would be useful. I don't know if that's just a question or a comment for that. What was my other piece? I like how you've already you're thinking of widening the trails, because I was concerned about, there's already where the multimodal, uses intersect, there can be obviously conflict sometimes. So it's great to see that you're widening the trails to hopefully reduce conflict with walkers, rollers, cyclists. Sorry, I'll stop there because Councillor Wright has been prompted.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor. I'm actually curious about that specifically. Where we have multi-use trails that intersect with our regional roadways, is there a plan to create a sort of unified signage that indicates that it's not for cars? We've seen 2 recent incidents, one on Herb turning onto the spur line of a vehicle making that turn and attempting to head up the multi-use trail, and another incident in Waterloo Park with somebody coming off of Father David Bauer Drive, crossing the Ion tracks and entering the park from that direction. So, I mean, just the fact that it's possible for vehicles to do that is a bit of an issue at this point in time.
Through you, Mayor. This project doesn't specifically look at like signage and different, like adding different signage. That is a very important question. And I know that colleagues of mine are working on different like wayfinding strategies. And I'm not sure if the Transportation Master Plan probably deals with, when trails are widened, what do we do to prevent cars from coming onto the trail? Because sometimes it is just a visual, people don't know, right? So it could be a mistake. But yeah, as far as the Laurel Greenway goes, we are looking at different sort of placemaking elements and just different ways to keep the space safe. That's, of course, very important. So yeah, we'll work together with our other teams in the city and keep that signage in mind, though.
Thank you. Did you have anything else? Okay. One of the things I was curious about was when you were talking about parkland development and it's about potentially needing incentives to utilize the private-owned public space. So my question is because there's already DCs that'll be paid, I'm just curious why we would need to give incentives to create the parkland space. If you could explain that better for me, because I'm just wondering why it's not through the DC parkland requirement.
Through you, Mayor. I'm not going to pretend to be a planning expert. That is not my area of expertise, but we did, work with our internal planning teams and our consultants on this strategy. I think parkland, my understanding of it is parkland, you can't, and this was before some of the changing legislation, but there are restrictions on what you can call parkland, right? Or what the dedication could be. So the incentive might be to use some of the space that will say fronts onto the greenway to, in theory, expand the greenway, where before that might not have been allowed through planning. So again, any detailed questions like that might be best answered by my planning teammates here, but yeah, that's. I think it has to do with sort of the floodplain and different parkland dedication rules that would typically apply.
Right. Thank you. I mean, I mostly understand all of that, but I was just wondering why we would need to give the private developers incentives when they actually are supposed to be giving us DCs to create parkland. So, So why would there need to be potentially incentives put in place?
I'm not sure. So incentives, like financial incentives or what? Okay, yeah.
Refer to incentives. So
okay,
I don't know.
Yeah. So I can look into that more specifically and maybe get back to you. But it's just we're trying to make partnerships really and make the most. Like the greenways consisted of city-owned lands. There's a little bit of region-owned lands and then some privately owned lands. So it's really just trying to develop a plan for all of us to kind of work together toward this overall goal. So I can get back to you on the specifics.
Okay. Yeah. No, and I appreciate that. They with their part of their development includes that they have to create some parkland, and we're creating that in I think a really creative way. So I just kind of wonder why we would need to give them some more financial incentive to do that. So anyway, I think that was, oh, and I'm just curious too about the Laurel Creek area that's particularly just outside City Hall here. Is there a plan at some point to try and reduce the amount of concrete that's there? Like, I appreciate the work that you've put into like seeing how you can make it look more attractive and more welcoming and that kind of stuff. But is it possible to really reduce the concrete there and kind of make it more park-like?
Through you, Mayor. Yeah, that's a bigger project. I think that's like a longer term sort of outside of the scope of this project.
Okay, thank you. It just, I guess that's a dream. Okay, thank you. Those are, again, really appreciate the work that you and your team have put into this. I think it's really exciting what you come up with, and look forward to you coming back with proposals and projects getting underway and things like that. So, council, anything else? No? Okay, thank you very much. And so looking for a mover and a seconder to Councillor Wright moves it, and Councillor Vasek seconds that. So all in favor of the recommendations, that is unanimous. Thank you very much, Emily. And sorry, I don't know the names of the staff, or Chris and thank you very much for the work put into that. I really appreciate it. So next up is the expanded after hours call center recommended solutions, and Leslie Heptich is here. Welcome, Leslie and Lee. And all right, so over to you then. There's no presentation again, so over to, do you want to do a brief overview and then we'll take questions? Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor and Council. We delivered the expanded after hours customer service recommended solutions report back in January, and we were just asked to come back in Q2 to talk about the funding for the implementation of the project. The implementation will include we're asking for $100,000 from the 2023 approved capital budget, and then returning for the 2024 to 2026 capital budget planning to continue on with this project. So that funding will include hiring a consultant to help implement this, assigning 50% of a staff person's time to lead this project, and then backfilling that 50%, and then other staff resources as well. So I'll turn it over to you if you have any questions.
Thank you, Leslie. Council, does anyone have any questions about this? No? Okay. I just have one.
Yeah.
And I don't know. Sorry, I'm just trying to remind myself what my question was. Oh, so you said it's 50% of a staff person's time. And I was just thinking, like in the report you outlined, like how much savings we're going to realize once this project's kind of up and running. So I'm just curious, if we had a full-time person on there, how much more quickly would this, like is there the capacity to have someone working on this full-time? And if so, like what would that do in terms of like accelerating some of the cost savings that we're going to realize through this?
I'll let Lee or Kim take this one.
Okay.
Through you, Mayor. One of the things that we looked at in the implementation recommendations was that full-time manager position, and I think one of the realities that the city faces is a significant amount of work that has to be done on a number of different initiatives over the next 3 years, and having a manager position, I think it's going to be really held up by all of the individual divisions and all the different parts of the city that need to come together to make this a success. So the idea in having that 50% person assigned is to ensure that we can proceed in a stepwise fashion. I think we could definitely get enough tea, but I think we would be very limited in what we could roll out. One of the other big considerations is the communications team. We want to ensure, because of the digital aspect of the recommendations, it has to be completely aligned with the digital strategy, and that also is an important tie-in. And I think to rush, it may end up being a bigger issue for the communications team overall to deliver everything that they need to do. So we decided, given the city's pressures, we want to keep this moving, but we want to do it in such a way that it's stepwise and we can actually see some, tangible results and make some progress. So we don't want to be delivering something that ends up being a failure to the public. So.
Okay, thank you. And we do not want you delivering something of that quality either. So, okay, thanks. I appreciate that. And I was curious if there's capacity with staff and other departments to do that. So thank you very much. That was my only question about it. But otherwise, another project I'm really excited to see move forward. So seeing no questions, thank you very much again. And council, so there's a couple of recommendations, 3 recommendations here. Looking for a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Hamner, seconded by Councillor Freeman. All in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you very much, Leslie and team. So now we are moving to a workshop. And this is with respect to the winter sidewalk maintenance review and potential service enhancement workshop. And this will be facilitated by Nicole Papke, Carrie Van Nykirk, and introduced by Bob Henderson. So welcome to you all, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor, members of council, staff, and the public. Today, I'm pleased to introduce the Winter Sidewalk Maintenance Review and Potential Service Enhancements Workshop. Over the past several months, staff from Transportation Services, Parks, Forestry and Cemetery Services, Municipal Enforcement Services, and Corporate Communications formed a working group to initiate a comprehensive review of the city's winter sidewalk clearing practices. This brief presentation is intended to provide the necessary background, key conclusions of the review, key important maps, and potential service improvements identified by the city's working group for council's consideration. On December 14th, 2009, the city introduced its snow and ice removal bylaw. This bylaw remains in effect today and requires private property owners, both residential and commercial, to remove snow and ice from their respective sidewalks within 24 hours following accumulation. Private property owners are collectively responsible for clearing snow from approximately 468 kilometers of sidewalk. The remaining 85 kilometers of sidewalk is cleared by city staff. This collaborative approach to clearing sidewalk is often referred to as a hybrid or shared model. This practice in Waterloo is consistent with that of most other municipalities in Ontario. In 2019, a review of operations was completed by a consultant team from Deloitte. As a result of this 2019 review, the following recommendations have already been implemented. Departmental sharing of a dual position, review of winter shifts resulting in expanded evening, overnight, and weekend shifts. Trail equipment rotation resulting in trackless units being rotated between the service center and Waterloo Park between the hours of use, or to balance the hours of use, sorry. The remaining 2 recommendations for the sidewalk trails is ongoing. This includes enhanced trail equipment and tiered services for bike lanes and trails being prioritized with staff from active transportation. The working group was able to draw 6 key conclusions from its review. These would include that the city's winter clearing model and practices are consistent with most other municipalities in Ontario, that there are opportunities to enhance the city's level of service, but at the cost of environmental impacts, including greenhouse gases and increased use of salt that could impact drinking water. It is recognized that additional services may not be enough to satisfy residents. 3 service models have been developed following direction from Council. Each model incrementally increases the overall level of service provided to residents. Staff anticipate requiring approximately 3 years to introduce these new services. These service models are certainly open to discussion and questions and may be tailored based on input from Council during this particular workshop. Lastly, we certainly acknowledge that the challenges faced by members of the public with accessibility concerns is far greater than the challenges associated with winter maintenance. Today, the city takes approximately 3 to 5 days to clear its inventory of sidewalks, multi-use trails, and multi-use paths. City staff are proposing to prioritize the clearing of snow from sidewalks, multi-use trails, and multi-use paths more strategically in 4 priority zones. This proposal would see the city aim to clear all sidewalks, multi-use trails, and multi-use paths falling within Priority Zone 1 in pink, Zone 2 in yellow, Zone 3 in green, and Zone 4 purple within 12, 24, 36, and 48 hours respectively following a snowstorm. Again, the goal of this plan is to reduce the timeline to clear sidewalks and related infrastructure from 3 to 5 days down to 2 days. Similarly, staff have identified key multi-use trails that support students' routes to schools as a priority for snow clearing services. City staff would aim to service these key routes to schools within 12 hours following a snowstorm. The following map here illustrates winter sidewalk related complaints generated in the 2022-23 past winter season. Staff speculate that the majority of complaints are strongly correlated with the problems often associated with curb-face sidewalks, as these types of sidewalks are more predominant in the core area of the city. This map highlights the location of curb-face sidewalks in the city, and as you can see, curb-face sidewalks is largely concentrated in the core area of the city. The following are potential new services identified by the working group that address key gaps in service identified by the public. These are detailed in the report. During the workshop, we'll go through each of these services and enhancements in more detail. For the purposes of this workshop, the working group has updated the financial table that's indicated in the report to better separate out capital and operating costs. I won't go through the specifics of this chart at this time, but we can certainly reference it during the workshop. The city's working group is confident that the identified potential service enhancements address gaps in service identified by the public and meets the intent of Council's direction. It should be noted that guaranteed accessibility in all winter conditions is not possible under any model of the sidewalk snow clearing, but improved winter accessibility under all conditions is an achievable goal. I would like to express my sincere thanks and gratitude to members of our working group, Robin Milne, Nicole Papke, Susan Bolt, Carrie Van Niekerk, Tom Margetts, Sunda Siva, Terry Henderson, Chris Hodgson, Chad Heisey, and countless other staff who assisted in this comprehensive review. During this workshop, many of these staff are certainly available to help answer any questions that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Henderson, and I think thanks as well to the people who from the community who've provided input already into this as well, because I think that's important. And I just wanted to also remind council and to anyone listening that no decisions will be made today. This is a workshop, not a decision making. We're not at a decision making point yet. So over to Carrie and Nicole to lead us through this workshop. Thank you both.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council. As you've seen in the report, there's a broad range of options available to staff, and there's wide community support for overall improved winter sidewalk accessibility. I think we didn't quite touch on everything under the sun to try and address the issue of snow, but certainly in the amount of time the working group had, we looked at a very wide range of options here for your consideration. What we're looking for today is to try and come to a winter sidewalk maintenance resolution, not a solution. We're looking for a direction from council in terms of how to put some of these options together in a way that will meet the needs of the community that were expressed prior to this review, that were expressed through the community engagement done as part of this review, and to address some of the concerns that you yourselves may have heard from your constituents. We do have a few items that have not appeared in the report that I would just like to mention. Discussion with our municipal partners on potential optimization and cooperation on clearing efforts, together with GRT, Kitchener, or the region. We haven't had time to have a fulsome discussion with those municipal partners yet, so you will not see a recommendation related to those things, but those discussions certainly continue behind the scenes and will be something the team will continue to take forward. A review of the bylaw in terms of timing does also not appear. Staff feel that the 24-hour period currently in the bylaw is fairly the community felt as part of the survey that the 24-hour timeline for property owners to clear their sidewalks was a sufficient amount of time and reasonable expectation. And the community also let us know that that 24-hour timeline was a reasonable amount of time in which to start enforcing our bylaw. To shorten that timeline in terms of enforcement would be quite challenging based on snowfall patterns and not always happening during bylaw available hours. So as of right now, we're not looking at a review of that timing, but again, could be considered for future. And finally, there will be a need for improved communications, however this program rolls out. So an improvement of communication with all property owners around expectations and responsibility for the coming winter snow clearing program, touching on all types of owners, commercial, business, landlords, as well as personal homeowners, as well as expanded communication around reporting, how our reporting process works, any reporting improvements that we do put into place this winter will also become a key part of this program as we go forward. Our workshop is in two parts this afternoon. The first part is clarification. We'd like to take you through each of the options that the working group has landed on, just to ensure that we're all on the same page as to what that option entails. Some of the options had pre-considerations and pre-recommendations that the working group went through to land on that service option. So we'd like to ensure that you understand that process and have the opportunity to ask any questions of clarification for each of these options. Once we've gone through the options themselves, we'll come back and ask you what is missing. Some things the working group considered and discarded as part of the process, and therefore they don't appear on the list before you. There may also be some things that you expected to see that I have not addressed in terms of our parking lot items or that had not been considered by the working group, and we'd love to give you the chance to bring that forward to us. And then finally, we'll ask you to do a prioritization exercise, looking at each of the individual options, as well as the suite of options as presented for potential for us to take away to help us determine how we can move forward with recommendations for a final plan for this. To begin, we'd like to address the first option, which is noted as clearing crosswalks at intersections. And what we're getting at here is actually clearing the windrows at intersections, windrows being the large piles of snow. We've heard from many members of the community that these are difficult for all residents to pass through and was a priority piece that we heard from everyone. Staff recommends specifically addressing windrows at crosswalks, intersections, and trail crossings separate from sidewalk plowing. Prioritize clearing for those crosswalks through the 4 areas as in the prioritization map that was attached to the report in attachment D. And in order to do this, it would require the purchase of an articulating wheel loader and additional operations staff rather than contracting out as the more cost-effective option. Hopefully you've had a chance to review. That's in section 2.1. And now we'll take any questions regarding that option.
Thank you very much. So yeah, over to you, Councillor Freeman.
Through you, Mayor McCabe. As you know, I asked a few additional questions related to financial implications that aren't in the report right now, and I just wondered if now's the right time to share that with council, the information that I received, or if you want me to provide it per item.
Was that information was circulated to all of council, correct? Well, I guess I'd look to,
I don't think so.
I don't know the full, like the order of the questions that you have, Carrie and Nicole. So wondered, like, I'll look to you to provide your advice.
We could provide the opportunity to discuss the financial implications as part of the what's missing, because I think some of that information wasn't included.
Okay.
If that will work for you.
Yep, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. And can I just ask a question just around the bylaw? I know before we dive too deeply into this, just for clarification, when it says 24 hours, is that after snow has stopped falling, or is it just 24 hours, like you have to clear whether snow is still falling or not?
So when there is your sidewalks are to be free and clear of snow and ice at all times. However, when there is an accumulation of snow, then you have 24 hours after the cessation of the snow that has fallen. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. But I know we're not going to discuss it today, but I think that there's a challenge with that, right? Because it could snow for 5 days straight and you still, like, the sidewalk's not going to get cleared until the 6th day. So I think that's a problem potentially, with the bylaw. So, but I don't know, like, you've said that you don't want to discuss that part of it today. I just wanted some clarity around that.
Sure. Yeah, that can be a challenge if there are days where it does continuously snow in terms of the ability to actually do the enforcement. Yes, That is always going to be a challenge. And I think most municipalities have that challenge, but it is a benchmark to kind of give homeowners the time to clear their sidewalks.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Councillor Vasek.
Through you, Mayor. Am I remembering in the report right that clearing crosswalks at intersections did you mention somewhere in here that it would be extremely difficult without also doing the sidewalks? Or am I remembering that wrong?
So in the report, it notes that the equipment to do the sidewalks is not the ideal equipment to go back and return to clear those windrows after a plow's been through. So those aren't always a coordinated effort given different priorities for plowing. And so the piece of equipment that's being recommended in the report, the articulating wheel loader, it's a heavier piece of equipment because hand bombing teams, to send them out in a pickup truck, it's a very difficult thing to do. I think we've all experienced trying to lift the heavy snows in a windrow. So if you imagine that times however many intersections we'd need to clear, staff are recommending a piece of equipment for it, and it would need to be separate from the sidewalk plow.
Okay, thank you. Yes, that really helps very much. Thanks.
Okay, so questions about the first question here, clearing crosswalks at intersections. Are there other questions, Council? Yep, Councillor Bodley.
Through you, Mayor. Clarification on which intersections. Is this every intersection in the city that would be cleared? Obviously at different intervals. I understand that, or is this prioritizing certain intersections? I know the map sort of says 1, 2, 3, 4. But is this every intersection or just certain intersections?
It's a good question. I'm going to let Bob take that one.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, to Councillor Bodley. Great question. The number of intersections to be cleared would be certainly dependent on the number of vehicles and staff operating those vehicles. We've estimated that one articulated wheel loader unit can clear approximately 50 intersections a day, and that's over 3 shifts, so approximately 16 to 17 intersections per shift. When you scale that up to 2, 3, 4 wheel loaders, you just multiply it by that factor. It's also dependent on the number of times. So we are recommending that the articulated wheel loader unit operate within that priority 1 zone and expand out as they reasonably can over time, subject to no new winter storm approaching. So yeah, it's certainly based on resources and number of equipment. Hope I answered your question appropriately.
Yeah, just as a follow-up though, but every intersection though, eventually, is that the idea here? Or like if we went with just to maybe let's play devil's advocate here, just do a thought experiment. If we went with the first option here, that's only one loader, that's 50 intersections per day. I think you said there were like 3,000 windrows or intersections throughout the city. So my math is awful, but however long that takes, we would eventually get to all of those, or would we just pick a few hundred intersections to do, and ignore the rest of them? What's the thought process there?
Yeah, through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Bodley, we would certainly have to scale it accordingly, but the idea is to do the course of clearing intersections over the course of a few days a week, and scale that up accordingly over time. We want to start out with a reasonable number of locations that we can get to, not setting up an expectation that we'll do more than we can actually do before the secondary snowstorm comes.
Do you have other questions? Oh, okay. Other questions or clarification, Council? Sorry, I was just thinking if I had a question about that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Wright.
Through you, Mayor. We just had a question from a resident come in via email, and it was regarding the GHG emissions associated with the articulated wheel loader. So I just want to highlight that this is in the report, that it's 4,800 liters is what you're estimating of fuel use per year to do the 50 intersections a day.
That is correct.
And then do we have an idea roughly of what the magnitude of that GHG addition to it? Like, is that comparably? It looks like some of the other options, for instance, curb-faced sidewalks would be less, and maybe the regional road service upgrade would be kind of in the middle. But it's the most expensive option, right? The articulated intersection coverage?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Wright, that is correct. Like, we've done our best job at estimating the fuel use per type of vehicle. The articulated wheel loader unit uses a little bit more fuel than our current snowplow units that we currently incorporate for clearing snow. So these are our best estimates at this time.
Right. And are they diesel?
I believe they're...
Yeah. Okay. Like I just saw that because I do from time to time follow snow equipment and fleet electrification. There are electric ones coming to market, but it wouldn't be in time for us to be adding electric quite yet.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Wright, we're currently reviewing the technology. From what I understand through staff experts in this area is that the electric vehicles don't provide the strength or torque to push snow very well, or the battery lifetime. Yeah. So
not quite there yet.
Yeah, we're not quite there yet. Thank you.
Other questions, Council? Just to pick up on one of Councillor Wright's points around the GHGs, did you do any, or is it possible, I don't know if it's possible to estimate, if you, like, we go to an increased service standard here with the goal being to get more people to walk or to feel safe walking, biking, whatever, on their way to work or wherever they're going, is there, we might increase GHGs using their articulated loader, but then could we offset it by saying, more people feeling like they have the ability to safely walk or use active transportation as a way to get to wherever they're getting in the winter? Could it be offset that way?
That's a great question. One that's very tough for me to compute, obviously, but the argument could certainly be made that if you're promoting more active transportation, you're getting people out of your car. How much of an offset that provides, it's a little difficult to answer at this point in time.
Okay. And just, I'm also wondering about the speed with which some of our snowplows and other vehicles go, how much that contributes to the, like if it's, does it help to reduce the speed and will they still have the power? Sorry, I talk with my hands. Will they still have the power they need to move the snow? But if they, can speed be reduced a bit so it doesn't throw it quite so dramatically to create those windrows?
So I'm assuming we're talking about road maintenance vehicles now instead of sidewalk maintenance vehicles. Yeah.
Whichever, right? Because the sidewalks are creating a windrow on the road or the curbs and crosswalks, and the road maintenance vehicles are creating windrows on the roads. Like they're both creating them, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not something that we can, get around. It's always going to happen.
But I'm just wondering if a speed adjustment reduces the size of the windrow.
No, it might reduce the lateral offset that is pushed over at, but the size of the windrow remains the same. It's obviously equivalent to the amount of snow that's on the road. So in terms of slowing down, you might, I'm going to estimate that you might see some fuel savings in terms of slowing down. However, it comes at a cost of service delivery. It slows down the service delivery at the same time.
Right. And my question, I mean, I've just heard from a number of people and communities ask, there's sort of this assumption that the speed that the snowplow is going is throwing the snow further. That's really what I'm just trying to address, that piece of it. Like, does that actually make a difference one way or the other in terms of like the windrows that are left?
Again, the speed at which the drivers push snow at, they're certainly cognizant of this. But there is a requirement to get the snow off the road per minimum maintenance standards. But yes, there is a correlation between speed and the distance the windrow is pushed laterally.
Okay, so are we good to move on to question 2? Or did you have any other comments that you wanted to add? No? Okay.
No.
Okay.
We're ready to move.
All right, ready to move on.
We are. I have to keep moving this. I think Carrie and we picked like the shot.
I wore flats today.
I'm not going to move the desk each time. We just don't have time for that. Okay, so item number 2, which is in section 2.6.2, is the assisted services contract. So staff are recommending service funding to support more snow removal beyond the current provincial home service model available to those in physical and or financial need. So if you wish to have a discussion, Jim is also here if you wish to hear about the current program or have questions about how that program works.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. That was short and sweet. Yeah. Did you have a question, Councillor Bassett? Yeah, okay. And then we'll go to Councillor Freeman.
Very well done. Very fast. Yes. So to me, this is potentially 2 separate items. One, is it good to expand the program because people might need it to stay in their home? Yes. And that's like aside from the sidewalk snow clearing question. And I want to say that so I don't sound crass asking the second question, which is, do we know if the people who might access this program are actually like the problem households, in that are they the ones regularly not clearing their sidewalks, or are they clearing their sidewalks but could personally benefit from having this service?
So this is partially based on the community feedback we got from our focus groups with both older adults and adults with disabilities. So not everyone who could benefit from the current program has access to it. There is a financial component for the paid service model to have the paid home service. And we heard very clearly that people who could benefit from it for reasons of only having a single able-bodied adult in the household who's also a caregiver to someone who requires 24/7 care, it's very difficult for them to find time to get out and clear their sidewalk. We heard loud and clear from our older adult community, again, that expanded service to help them remain in their home is something that they would be interested in. They actually were the loudest with concerns around the 24-hour period and the potential for knowing how much education is done by our enforcement team before enforcement and a notice is issued, with their concern being sometimes they have contracted service that during the busy conditions of a snow event simply hasn't shown up within their contracted time. So there are a lot of concerns out in the community. This is based on, we know Kitchener's expanded their model to assist people in their homes, and this is one of the takeaways they did have from their 2-year pilot. So it seemed like a good possibility to bring forward.
Right. Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
So I can add to this as well that we often do hear from an enforcement perspective when we have issued a notice, which is giving a homeowner 24 hours to comply. So in that notice, it would outline the violation. However, we do hear from a lot of residents that there isn't enough places within those programs, and they could use that assistance or would want to be part of the program, even the financial piece. So it is something we do hear from the community, just for council's perspective, during our enforcement activities.
Oh, yeah, that's helpful. I'd be, this isn't clarification anymore, but I'd love to see this come back. This doesn't even for me need to be on the winter sidewalk clearing option. Like, I don't even want to rank this. I just want to do this anyhow. So that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Vasek. Other questions? Councillor Freeman.
That's through you, Mayor McCabe. Can you provide some insight, Mr. Bowman, in terms of what the pressure is on this program, in terms of how many, I guess, we're turning away, how many people we're turning away right now that are looking for this help? Would the amount of money identified within these 3 models address that pressure, or is it not enough? So I'm just trying to get a sense. Like, we've got 3 service levels here. Does service level 3 actually achieve your wait list challenges?
So through you, excuse me, through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Freeman. Just get my notes correct here. We had 60 registered clients last season who registered for our snow program, which is a provincially funded program formerly called a LINS. That means that individuals sign up or apply to be on the list to receive the snow shoveling program. Our staff evaluate to ensure that they qualify based on the criteria established. In that, we have, we then broker the workers. So we have roughly 15 workers who each client will pay approximately $20 to $25 an hour to have their driveways, their porches, and their sidewalks cleared. Now, the numbers we have turned away probably would be in the numbers of 40 to 50 people, because we just don't have the volume of workers to shovel the snow.
Okay, thank you. My next question, I guess, is for Mr. Henderson. So in terms of addressing this item, what are the, I guess, what's your cost basis? So you've listed here under service contract at 300 service contracts. So recognizing that the clients pay, like, I'm trying to understand how we've developed this piece, I guess.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor. This was based on a cost through looking at the programs in the city of Kitchener and Cambridge. So they were benchmarking costs based on those organizations.
Do you have another question, or
Well,
is that clear?
I guess it's just, if you can just unpack this for me. So fundamentally, this assisted services contract would be a new thing that we would offer. It's not really in conjunction to what Mr. Bowman's doing right now. Is that correct?
Through you, Councillor McCabe, that is correct. It would be an additional service.
Okay, all right, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. Other questions from council? Councillor Rowe.
Through you, Chair. I'm actually not sure if I want to ask this here or in the curb face sidewalk, so you can decide where you'd like to answer it. But what I'm wondering is if there's something like the curb face sidewalk clearing implemented, would that then have a direct relation to this program? So if we're doing, say, Uptown or in Ward 6, Columbia, and providing more accessibility, would that, and more clearing, would that, is there an anticipation that it would, say, impact that in a positive way?
Any additional sidewalk kilometers that the city would take on would certainly be of assistance, but I think it's too difficult for us to quantify where all of the individuals who might benefit from a program with this are. That actually came up in community discussion. If we could identify such hot spots of need, that might help us with this program. Unfortunately, that's beyond what we can do right now.
Thank you.
Other questions, council? I just had a question about the home support service. Just kind of curious. I don't want this to sound critical because I'm actually just would like to know what the answer is. But you said, I think, Mr. Bowman, I think he's still here somewhere. Oh, there he is. That staff sign up. They start in July and until October, it takes them that long to sign up these clients. I'm assuming that's not the only work they're doing during that time. But why does I know you said they have to assess people who apply, but are there a lot of people who reapply year after year, or like I might get it this year, but I might not get it next year? Like, I'm just kind of wondering why it would take 4 months to identify 65 people who are going to get this service.
Yeah. So the process is such that it's a home maintenance and home care model. So some of the clients might be receiving grass cutting and other home maintenance services with us. So in early August, we sent out a note saying, are you interested in the program for snow shoveling? And then the recipients would apply back, say, yes, we are. And generally it is a return because they've already been approved or got their applications in. The timing really is to get the snow shovelers, because we get the snow shovelers, our staff look after it, they link them up to the various individuals, and that's what takes the time to link them up, sign the waivers, that kind of stuff to make sure, because each person will pay the snow shoveler at each time they go and visit their house. So it takes time to link them up, get the snow shovelers, and then get things in place.
Like, do the snow shovelers and like it changes?
Yeah, the snow shovelers generally do change quite frequently.
Okay. Thank you.
And if I could just clarify, that home services model with the brokered workers that we have right now, that is not what this item is looking to expand. This item is looking to expand additional service where that model is subject to provincial guidelines for who is qualified. And it does have that paid brokered model where the homeowner pays whomever is essentially hired, vetted through the city to go and do their clearing. What we're suggesting with this assisted services contract is, and where the majority of the cost is associated and where we think there would be additional participants, is to be able to meet the needs, not just for those who might not physically be able to clear their snow, but financially unable to maybe pay a brokered worker, where the city would take on the costs. The city would either contract directly or have direct staff going out and doing this work. So this would be a city-run program under guidelines that our staff would develop to qualify people.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I guess with the home, and I realize there's the distinction. I was just, again, just curious about why it does seem to take a long time to make that, and was curious if there's some kind of efficiencies there that would actually provide more service to the home support program. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. Over to Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I'm just sort of following on Councillor Vasek's comments about, maybe this being two different things. One being specifically about snow clearing services and improving our service standards overall, and the other one being more of a winter support plan for people with accessibility issues or age-related constraints. And so I'm wondering whether there's actually community organizations that might be really well positioned to assist with the latter, being this, the idea of providing more support to people in the community through the winter. And whether that was part of, or, whether any ideas were generated through the consultation phase that might point to that. And I think partly from the perspective of having run walking school buses for kids, and being able to draw from both the Canadian Cancer Society and from Laurier specifically. Like, I always had Laurier students walking kids to school, and that was all winter long. Like, they were totally available to do that at 8 a.m. So just putting that on the table, that sometimes we underestimate the volunteer capabilities in our community, and I'm wondering how far we might be able to go with that.
It certainly came up with community consultation, the importance of having a vetted program where participants are going through some sort of a screening process. The participants who gave us feedback in our focus groups said, no, it doesn't have to be the city necessarily running that program. It does need to meet certain safety requirements. Particularly, a lot of our older adult communities are single females remaining in their home, and so to have someone come to their home on a regular basis, it's important for them to feel safe about that. You're right, this is maybe beyond just winter sidewalk snow clearing, and I think part of the direction that we got from council was to come back with recommendations to inform the 3-year budget process. So that's where we've sort of expanded the umbrella a little bit here. There are a few volunteer organizations in the community. There's the Snow Angel option that we have been able to make people aware of. We haven't had the opportunity to visit an expansion of that program and what some of their possibilities may be. We do know from our experience with the brokered worker program that we do experience challenges even where people are committed and there's payment involved in having that regular service be as dependable as people would like for something like this. But there's certainly some other options with volunteerism. To have something be within the city's scope and control would be the best way for the city to commit to improving this particular matter.
Thank you, Carrie. Are you good? Okay. Other questions or comments from? Okay, I think we're ready to move on to item 3, snow loading curb face sidewalks.
So ideally we would have a nice picture to show you. Hopefully everyone understands what we mean by curb face sidewalk. But in areas where we've expanded our roads, and it's a regional road, but Columbia Street is a good example, and I think of it because I used to live on it when it became a 4-lane road. There is no more boulevard between the road and the sidewalk, or just minimal. So these are the areas that we're talking about when we're talking about curb face sidewalk. When we looked at this, the idea being that whether the snow plow is plowing the snow or the sidewalk plow is plowing the snow, it's consistently either ending up back in the road or on the sidewalk, and is a challenge for whoever's responsible. So the idea being that to have a contractor to haul away the snow, to load it up and haul it away and take it to a snow dump would be the most, the best way to deal with that and eliminate that problem. Across the various service options that are there are taking on responsibility for varying lengths up to 30 kilometers of curb face sidewalk in the city. And what staff looked at in terms of estimates was that having a contractor do that work versus having to invest in in-house equipment and staff to do that work would be the most cost-effective option. I will call everyone's attention to option B, to make a note that this also includes an expectation that staff would likely take on sidewalk snow clearing responsibility for those curb face sidewalk areas, with the understanding as spelled out in the report that if residents in those areas or businesses see trucks coming along to clear that snow and get it out of the way, there unfortunately might be a lowered expectation from them of what they are responsible for doing, and to eliminate any problems there.
Councillor Freeman and then Councillor Wright.
So in the staff report, I'm trying to understand the 3 levels of service, how many kilometers of curb face sidewalk that each of them relate to. So I guess I'm trying to understand, it says the crew, its existing complement of staff to clear 40 kilometers of curb face sidewalk. Is that what we're doing right now? Is that what we plan to do? So I'm just trying to understand the 3 things and how many kilometers they each relate to.
So through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Freeman. So the 3 models there are based on 3 service triggers of 8 centimeters of snow, 5 centimeters of snow, and 3 centimeters of snow. So that any of those service triggers would essentially trigger the contractor to go out. So incrementally, they would be going out based on the options more often, hence increasing the cost overall to those programs. One difference between in-house and contracting a service that we should note, contracting a service, contractors can use machinery and snow blowers that are much bigger in size compared to our existing units that we use today. So that is primarily a reason why they can service more road per hour than an in-house crew would be able to do.
Sorry, of course.
Yes, if I may, I misspoke there in my understanding of the 3 different levels being, so they're all the 30 kilometers of sidewalk under the 3 different service triggers.
All right,
sorry, we have different priority areas for.
Yeah, sorry, that's great. And so I'm just trying, like, I think we're clearing some curb face sidewalk currently. And so I'm just trying to understand how much of an increase this is. Because it's going to be the same amount, right? It'll just be different triggers. And how much of the total amount of curb face would we then be tackling, I guess?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Freeman. So currently our practice now is very limited in terms of clearing curb face sidewalk. It's a very low percentage of that 30 kilometers of total curb face sidewalk.
Councillor Wright, did you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thank you. Through you, Mayor. So I'm just trying to create a link also between the snow loading and the snow storage. And so wondering how the snow loading, if it's contracted out, are they bringing it back to city facilities for the storage, or are they responsible for loading it where they already have a space for it?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Wright. Great question. 30 kilometers of snow to haul away is no easy task. Currently, the city has 1 facility situated on Frobisher Drive. We call it, it's a snow dump site specifically for relocating snow from, right now, we're relocating snow from our LRT, some parking lots. That predominantly makes up what snow we're storing there today. My understanding through speaking with staff that operate vehicles at that site is near capacity. So our ability to move and relocate snow from 30 kilometers of sidewalk is quite limited. In thinking about that, we thought it would be appropriate to set up a contract with a contractor to be able to utilize that site until it's at capacity, and they would be required beyond that to haul snow somewhere else specific to their proposal.
Follow up, yeah, and then we'll go to Councillor Bodley.
So my second question has to do with the thresholds. So if we're looking at these different service levels for snow loading, being 8 centimeters, 5 centimeters, 3 centimeters, I don't personally think that 3 centimeters merits snow loading. I even question the 8 centimeter just because it's usually after you have multiple snow events and you have nowhere else to put the snow on curb-facing sidewalks. I have a curb-facing sidewalk, so the street that I live on gets down to a goat track with the snow banks. That's when we really need help. So I'm wondering how flexible we might be in terms of considering what that threshold is and maybe what your experience is in terms of where it gets to the point where, it becomes too much of a service burden in the time constraints that you have after snow event, because that's a delicate balance. And also let's all acknowledge the fact that our winters are wacky. It's not the predictable winter of years past. We are into sort of uncharted territory on what our winters are like.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Wright. Certainly great comments and good questions. It is a delicate balance for sure. To start, we figured as a baseline condition, 8 centimeters was made a lot of sense to our staff, since essentially 8 centimeters triggers what we call as a snow event. That's when we declare snow events and parking is banned on roads. It's generally a volume of snow that creates issues within the cities and mobility issues for pedestrians getting around. For example, when we receive 8 centimeters of snow, we also dispatch our snow blow contractor to clear out cul-de-sacs and radius elbows to clear snow from those difficult areas. And we felt that 8 centimeters of snow seemed to make a lot of sense to trigger a hauling crew. We looked at benchmarks in other cities, in the cities of Cambridge and Kitchener. Kitchener will dispatch their snow hauling crews at 2.5 centimeters, whereas the city of Cambridge triggers a snow hauling crew at 5 centimeters of snow. So we felt 8 was kind of maybe the right place for the cities to start, but that's certainly negotiable.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bodley.
Thank you, through Mayor McCabe. Notwithstanding my colleague living on a sidewalk with that's curb facing here, it looks like a lot of these sidewalks would be businesses and or landlords, rental properties, who presumably aren't going out there themselves and shoveling this sidewalk. Likely they have their own contractor who, if we were to do this, we would be easing that burden off of them, which is great. Have we talked to any of those businesses or landlords to see what their contracts may entail from a private perspective? Are they at 8? Are they at 5? Are they at 3? What do they look like?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Bodley. Unfortunately, we didn't have time to go out and consult those landlords and property owners.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a follow-up, Councillor Bodley? Okay. Any other questions on this point or comments? Yeah, Councillor Wright.
I have a follow-up to Councillor Bodley. Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Just wondering what sorts of requirements, contractor requirements, are required on our rental house licenses. Is snow clearing part of any sort of property standards, sort of baseline responsibilities? I mean, other than it being a bylaw obligation?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Wright. It's part of our sidewalk snow removal, so that it isn't part of the rental housing. General property maintenance would be, not including those snow clearing on those properties, but generally this is referring to the sidewalk snow clearing bylaw.
Okay, I think we're done with that one. Oh, sorry, one other question from Councillor Freeman.
I still don't have an understanding of how much total kilometers of curb face sidewalk do we have in the city? Do we know?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Freeman. Our inventory, using our engineering services, has advised us that the total length of curb face sidewalk in the city is 30 kilometers. Yeah.
Okay, so we are talking 100% clearing of curb face sidewalk in this piece.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so item 4 then, prioritize school routes. I think we're ready to move to that one.
Sure. So prioritizing the school routes, supporting the prioritization clearance of city-maintained sidewalks and multi-use trails near the schools as per the map. And just for a note, that is an item that we did hear that survey respondents in the Engaged did want to see as a focus for city sidewalk snow clearing, a prioritization of those city-maintained sidewalks near the schools and the multi-use trails.
Thank you, Nicole. Oh, sorry, did you have something to add?
Yes. I'm sorry, just for clarification, this item is speaking to prioritizing multi-use trails within key destinations of schools. So how we identified these multi-use trails was by drawing an 800-meter radius around a school and highlighting the key multi-use trails that connected the schools. So we're not talking about clearing all sidewalks in these radiuses. We're just talking about the key multi-use trails.
Great. Okay, thanks for that clarification. Yeah, and Nicole?
Yes, and through you, Mayor McCabe, the schools are themselves currently responsible for their own sidewalks in front of their property as well, just for clarification.
Okay. And do you know off the top of your head what the radius is for walking, walking versus busing? Like it's about 1 kilometer, isn't it? I just thought that might be helpful for people. Pardon? 1.2. Okay. Okay, so any comments or questions then, Council, on prioritizing school routes? Councillor Bodley.
Well, this might get into a broader conversation, I guess, but I'll start with clarification. Just the multi-use paths around those areas, or the city-owned sidewalks that we are responsible for clearing in those 800-meter radiuses as well, too?
So through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Bodley, we are talking about prioritizing multi-use trails within 800 meters of a school that have been identified by staff to clear those routes within 12 hours, similar to priority 1 zones. Sidewalks falling in any of these areas is dependent on the priority zones that we've identified in the service timelines that we had aimed to meet.
Right. So, given that and then since we're talking about this now, I'm going to bring this forward. That I might have saved this for the what else piece. But I think when people are talking about the, prioritizing the school route, I don't want to put words into people's mouths, but I'm going to use Laurelwood Drive as an example. We've got a few multi-use paths that come off of Laurelwood Drive. I don't doubt that some kids walk those multi-use paths to get to the school, and so I'm sure having those cleared within 12 hours would be appreciated. But if Laurelwood Drive is not cleared, which is completely fully backlotted homes, and aside from the spot where the school is, or if Herbsville is not cleared, which is the walking route for like 1,000 kids to Laurel Heights, and it's not cleared for 48 hours. Again, I understand that we are improving things from it takes 3 to 5 days. But when I look at the walking routes to school, I'm not really looking at those pathways. While I do think that they're important, I think we could put somebody out on the corner of Herbsville and Laurelwood and do a pedestrian count and see how many kids are walking those two routes, which are city cleared routes. And I guess I was a little disheartened to see that, well, frankly, the entirety of Ward 2 is in priority 4, but particularly around the high school, particularly those routes around the elementary schools. And if I may, I think perhaps as a suggestion or as a starting point, I suppose, what we just did in Ward 2 with the 30-kilometer-an-hour routes to schools would be like a good starting point for me in terms of, do we have city-owned sidewalks on those 30 or 40-kilometer-an-hour routes? We should clear those in priority. I won't be greedy. 2 instead of 4.
Thank you, Councillor Bodley. Over to Councillor Hanmer.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. I'll just piggyback on that as well, because all of Ward 1 is in priority 4, and it really would not help us to have the multi-use trails cleared if you can't even get to them because the sidewalks are not cleared. So I would support Councillor Bodley's consideration that you look at what are the routes around the schools. It would be ideal to have the multi-use trails and the sidewalks cleared. That's getting a little too greedy. I get it. But just look at what we're already putting in place and make sure that that's easy for people to get to.
Just for takeaway for staff, would there be then a preference if we could balance sidewalks and trails within those areas around schools, but potentially on a longer timeline?
There would be, just thinking where some of the multi-use trails go for the elementary schools that I have in Ward 1, absolutely parts of the trails would be advantageous. The sidewalk is probably more important because it will filter into other things about the buses and public transit being able to get there. So I think we have to we can't look at these. This is one of the issues I had with looking at this. A lot of great work has been done, but to pick it one at a time without seeing what the picture would look like for an entire area, it's a little bit tricky and a little bit difficult for me. And I guess since I still have the microphone, if you don't mind, one other comment is consideration in Ward 7 Uptown, which is all priority 1. It's a lot of businesses. Now we've had many businesses, and I'm thinking healthcare in particular, that has moved away from the core. And Ward 1, again, with fairly significant medical resources right now that seniors are going to. There are a lot of challenges with the bus, where the bus stops are, and those aren't being plowed, and the sidewalks not being plowed, and people are trying to get to appointments. I think you kind of see the picture. Ira Needles in particular has got a lot of challenges.
Thank you, Councillor Hanmer. Just want to make a note, there's 10 items on here, and not to say that we have to rush through this at all. I think this is really important, but I thought I was starting thinking there were 6, but there's actually 10. So just to keep that in mind. Councillor Vasek.
Thanks. I'm very excited about this conversation, but should we keep it till the what's missing? I have some comments I want to share on this conversation, and I just want to make sure I do it at the right time.
If it's related to school prioritization, I think now would be a good time.
Oh, super. So I'm very excited about this. And I had already flagged it for all of you that this is sort of the one that's, I think, a glaring opportunity for us. I think, first of all, because just by that simple shift of prioritizing the MUTs around school zones, it's $0, but just it's the starting point that could completely transform every single school zone, which has such like amazing potential ripple effects. So just a couple of things that I wanted to share with council. In last council term, I got in a little bit of internet trouble for talking about a gendered lens to snow clearing. So I won't call it a gendered lens to snow clearing, even though Sweden does. But I will call it a caregiving lens, where carers tend to be women more often, or femme identifying people. And so school zones are one of those places where often caregivers are going in the morning, and by clearing those routes, you help them get there so that they can get to work and make all the money for the economy, which is so important. And so, so that's one reason to do it. And the other reason to do it is to encourage people to go, to use their, to walk and to bike and to roll more than use the car. And so I think this is completely speculation, and just something that I wonder is if people can reliably get to school through the whole year, will that make them go more often by bike or other means than car, if they can more consistently do it, because then they get into the habit of doing it. Because once it's kind of a crappy day, you're like, oh, I'll just drive, you know. But if it's all cleared, maybe that will help more consistent use of bikes and walking, which could it relieve our school parking pressures? Oh God, I hope so. And then on that conversation, I just wanted to flag and ask, like, well, I know that you were looking at hybrid models, and so not full city clearing. The only other ask I would have is if we could look at Hamilton, because in our last council term, they did increase their sidewalk snow clearing. Oh, thank you. And also, so it was to include sidewalks around public schools, as well as sidewalks on bus routes. So I'm not entirely sure how that looks in practice, but I would love if we could have, this is what I would love to see in June. I would love for you to come back to us with how much it would cost to do all of this really well in every single school zone. And maybe that starts with one pilot in every ward, or maybe we can afford to do it incrementally over time in every single school zone. So that if I had my exact way, that's what if I had my exact way, we'd just clear everyone perfectly. But I'd like to see at least the school zones, if that's doable for staff. And if it's more doable to come back in September, I would love to see that. And I don't know if my council colleagues would.
Thank you, Councillor Vasic. I don't know if you wanted to respond to that or, okay.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Vasic. I did have a brief look at Hamilton's after reading your correspondence, but I would rather discuss with a staff member there a little more fully. One of the notations, though, on the website is that sidewalks adjacent to school property owned by the public board in conjunction with the city of Hamilton, the city will clear it on a chargeback basis. So, but they specifically indicated it was the sidewalk adjacent to schools. So I don't know if their program is more fulsome than that. So I haven't had a chance to look, but it definitely is something we're looking at.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Wright.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Just one consideration in terms of prioritization of school routes. So the school board changed its policy regarding snow days. So now they will cancel buses and keep the schools open, which means the walkers, like my kids, still go to school. And so those days when it seems like maybe you still have another day or two to get to those school routes, you don't actually. So just keep that in mind, because it is definitely alignment of policy there. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, I was curious. I was going to leave it to the budget piece of it, but like if there's any possibility that if we did go down this route, which is Councillor Vasic's wish, if there's some kind of chargeback or contributions that the school boards would provide, if we did do something like this, if that's might be possible. I know there's a lot of services that we provide the school board, work in partnership with them, but if that might be possible to defray some of these costs. Okay, so moving on to, actually I'll pause here just to ask council, because we are not quite halfway through this, and then we have one or two other items on our council agenda. Do people want to take a break, like a longer break, half an hour, 45 minutes, or do we, because this is looking, and it's okay that it will probably go into 6-ish, I would say. So do you want to take a break, either a bio break for a short break or a longer break if people need some sustenance, us or staff? Thoughts, council? Pardon? bio break? No, sorry? Okay, push through? Okay, so we'll push through, but we'll just, do you want that break right now, or? Pardon? Okay, so we'll take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Okay, we'll resume. Thank you very much for your indulgence with the short break. We are, okay. I think before we start back into the rest of these, if I'm going to turn to Commissioner Ormson, just to provide a few comments as well.
Thanks, Mayor McCabe, and thanks to council so far for some really good feedback to staff about what your impression is of what we could potentially do to enhance winter maintenance on sidewalks. I think for the balance of the workshop, if it's agreeable to you, Mayor, and the rest of council, I think the best route forward would be to sort of bring us back to the 6 key findings of the working group. Those are the conclusions that we really want council's reaction to see if those are the things that you've also heard through your constituents and through your experience that resonate with what you believe to be a reasonable approach to winter sidewalk maintenance. The 3 options that were provided by staff are very detailed. I think there's a lot there that we can still continue to work on, and if council have questions offline, we can answer them. But they are essentially 3 notional opportunities that would enable us to get to more detailed sidewalk clearing. But as council can see, they're very expensive, they're very complicated, they're very detailed, they require a lot of time to implement. Now, June is the right time to be talking about this, so that the time is well spent, I think, so that we're not doing it in the fall. But if I could suggest maybe we walk through some of the additional items, perhaps fairly succinctly, and I've asked staff to give, let's say, a little bit more brief answers on these so that we can, again, drill down to what it is that council would like us to see in general terms back at the end of next month. So in other words, would we like to see more snow clearing in the uptown and high transit routes? Would we like to investigate schools? Is there really no appetite to deal with that? Should we move to more of a winter support model that Councillor Wright mentioned, to look at those who really have those needs and focus on those areas first? But regardless of what we're going to end up with through this process, it's going to be incremental. Every year I've been at the city, we've always built upon the previous winter's experience to improve service. We've loaded more snow in the uptown than we have in the past. We're actually meeting a higher standard than other area municipalities are locally with our uptown snow loading. But as council can appreciate, this is not going to be something that's going to satisfy everyone overnight. There still will be complaints. There still will be weather patterns that are challenging to deal with. And it's really complicated to try and identify one single thing that's going to achieve perfection in this process. So if that makes sense to you, Mayor, my suggestion would be we move forward through that and get, again, the general feeling from council about the direction that staff should move forward on here to bring back a more targeted recommendation and let me say something clearer for council's consideration at the end of June.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner. And I think that approach makes a lot of sense. So with that in mind, council, if we, again, there's lots of interest, obviously, and input, but yeah, some of that can be provided offline. But yeah, it's really drilling into what are sort of those higher level priorities and what to give staff what they need to, coming out of this, to come back to us. Again, this is not a decision-making point that we're at today. So back to you, Carrie.
Thank you very much. The next piece that we have supports the key conclusion 6, which is the conclusion after speaking with our disabled community facilitated through our GRAC representatives that people with disabilities experience far greater issues through winter than sidewalk maintenance can address for them. And in speaking with our Office of Indigenous Initiatives, Accessibility, Anti-Racism, and Equity team, they identified that a small amount of funding available could help support those community members. We don't have details on what a pilot would look like, but they indicated that a pilot would be support greater winter sidewalk accessibility.
Thank you for that. Any comments or questions on that? I mean, I think certainly that's something that I'd very much support, and I'm seeing lots of nods around the council table here. Okay, so item 6 then, increased bylaw enforcement.
Through you, Mayor McCabe. So the increased bylaw enforcement would involve proactive inspections, having more officers to move through the priority areas as indicated on Map D. looking also at investigating the potential for an increased administrative fee for sidewalk clearing bills as an additional deterrent to repeat offenders.
Great, thank you. Comments, questions, Councillor Hamner?
Thank you. Again, just kind of a point of order in how we were just directed by Mr. Armstrong. I would have expected us to go back to page 37 of our packet and be looking at the conclusions rather than each one of the solutions. I thought I understood you to say, what are the things from the conclusions we feel are important? And maybe I misunderstood or misheard. If we're going to keep going through the list of the suggestions, and that's fine, I'll try to shape my comments that way, but I understood something different from Mr. Armstrong.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, Councillor Hammer. Yeah, yes, Councillor Hammer, that's what I was kind of getting at, is that as Kerry facilitates the remaining questions, if council could put those conclusions against the lens of the things that the team had identified here.
So a combination of both.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and it is to just, again, get your sort of initial impression. And I think back to the purpose of the workshop, it was really to hear from council. I know staff could provide eminent detail on these things for quite a while this evening, but it's really our opportunity to hear from you so that when we come back, we hit the mark.
Thank you. So I guess more comments, less questions so much, right? Just comments around what it is that you would prefer to see. Again, not so much.
And if I may, the focus of the working group was to improve our current existing model, whether that's for bylaw, whether that's for what operations is doing. So if we can try and focus those comments for this portion around that, as opposed to expanding beyond and where we can go outside our model and outside the box thinking, that might help us as well focus for the next little bit.
Did you want to make some comments, Councillor Hamner?
I still need to think about them, because I thought about this in a totally different way. I thought about this in terms of the conclusions, and which of the conclusions I felt required either some prioritization rather than the solution. So I just need to think it a little bit more.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wright, and then Councillor Bodley.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification. So there's 6 priorities on page 44 of the package. And is that what we're talking about, the 6 priorities, or are there a different set of conclusions? I'm sorry, I'm just getting caught up on language here and what we actually want to refer to.
Oh, sorry, did you want to respond?
Sure, through you I can. What I was referring to were the conclusions that the group came up with, which are on page 37.
Yeah,
and I think where I'm the only one that's on that page, so that's okay. That's fine.
But what Commissioner Ormson was saying, if your comments around these 10 points that are in front of us could be framed thinking of the conclusions on page 37. Yeah. Okay.
Mayor, if I could.
Go. Like, where did
Mayor, if I could, and I think it was a very good question there. So in other words, if you want to look at that as conclusion 2. So there's a ton of options that are in this report for background, but the conclusion of the working group is that, based on what we've heard, there's technical considerations, there's public input that we would obviously need to come back with once we land on a solution or another option based on council's wishes. Yeah. Yep. We're not here to, in other words, to weigh through all of the potential permutations of how we could do this. It's
right.
At a high level, what would be the overall expectation?
Right. Yeah. Does that help everyone? Okay. So did you have a question or a comment then, Councillor Wright, or no? Okay. All right. Councillor Bodley.
Perfect timing. Finish my cookie.
Where'd you get the cookie?
Sorry, you lose too slow. With respect to municipal enforcement, I guess I'm struggling a little bit with the conclusion of trying to make the city more accessible and how enforcement impacts that. I don't know that I believe that more proactive enforcement is going to lead to more compliance. I guess I'm struggling with that, so I'd like some comments there if you'd like. And I guess where I come from is the lens through which we look at bylaw when it comes to sidewalk clearing is an officer either proactively or reactively comes to a site, the sidewalk is impassable, and then there's a decision tree from there. We make a decision. We're going to either fine them, or we're going to give them a warning, or we're going to do something to that effect. And I guess the thing that I struggle with that response, just broadly speaking, is that the sidewalk is still unclear. And so if the goal is a clear sidewalk, enforcement eventually gets there, but I would love our response to somebody saying, hey, the sidewalk isn't clear. I would love our response to be, okay, well, we're going to clear the sidewalk so no one trips and falls. And enforcement takes so long to get there that I really struggle with it.
So I can speak to that through you, Mayor McCabe. Great points, Councillor Bodley. Just to kind of explain the process, typically we are complaints-based, which is, a resident or will report a sidewalk. We have heard from the community engagement that more proactive would be preferred, in that if we were actually looking for it, it wouldn't always be reliant on complaints, whether they're calling in on their neighbor or just perhaps not wanting to go through the process of registering a complaint. As far as the process of how we come to investigate a complaint, we would receive the complaint, our municipal enforcement staff would receive it. They would attend at the residence or business, observe the sidewalk, take the photographs. If it is in violation, then it's a notice that's issued. There's been some misinformation that it's an education piece. It's a notice that's issued, and it gives the homeowner, it advises the homeowner or the business owner of the violation, the time frame to clear it, which typically we give 24 hours for them to clear, which is a time sort of when an officer receives the call, goes and investigates, and then comes back to see if it's in compliance. And then at that point, if the sidewalk isn't in compliance, when they return to do the inspection, we would arrange for a contractor that we organize through the procurement process. So at that point, then a bill is generated and charged back to the homeowner with some administrative fees and an inspection fee. So yes, correct, there is a bit of a time frame in that happening, just in terms of giving the homeowner the chance to clear it. With some of our repeat offenders, which we have some, what we do is issue the order but go straight to cleanup. So we don't wait and give them the opportunity if we've had some multiple complaints at a particular address, which sometimes happens with vacant properties. So we would simply issue the order as a requirement under the Municipal Act, and then have the contractor come, and it would go straight to cleanup.
And does that include multi-residential and some of those construction sites? Because I think, to Councillor Bodley's point, I mean, overall, it's like these, people need these areas cleared, and that time lag can be a real challenge for, anybody trying to get through.
So it would include all of the sidewalks that the city does not maintain. That is the responsibility of the property owners to maintain, including vacant lots. But there is a lot of that sidewalk within the city, so it does take time. We currently have a model where we have 3 zones and 3 officers, and then a facilitator to kind of manage the intake. And there is another point coming up in the next one that we feel would be a helpful solution that we did hear from GRAC, and from also further community engagement that we can discuss if we wanted to move on to number 7 as well.
Unless council had any comments. Oh, yep, we can move on to 7. Oh, sorry.
So one of the...
Oh, just hold on a second. Oh, sorry. Okay.
So just to move on to item 7, in terms of providing more customer service support for being able to facilitate and intake the complaints. We have an online process. I mean, there's multiple ways with which residents can put in a complaint. However, it's not often by phone if it's after hours, so it would be on our online reporting system. And we did hear from several members in GRAC and in other community engagement that it would be helpful to have a part-time customer service representative that would be able to intake it on the phone and speak with the customer, help them if they're unsure of what the address was, and a general area. That was really something that we did hear a lot of people were very, very interested in.
Oh, sorry, thank you. Comments around that then, council? Is that not, sorry, go ahead.
So all I was going to say is that if, let's say council wants to push for, prioritizing school routes, for example, if the city can't maintain all the kilometers within school routes and we suggest we'd like increase bylaw, can it then focus on those priority routes that we might identify? Like, I feel like that's a big of the problem, like that, with the complaints based to bylaw, they're all over the city responding to complaints, as opposed to there being a focus per se on these really big priority routes.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Freeman, that's an excellent point, and I think that is the suggestion with having strictly proactive. It is a challenge currently for our staff to even manage all of the complaints that we get and keep up, because they're quite high numbers in terms of that. So having that proactive approach and to be able to focus on those priority areas, the accessible routes, the transit routes, would be very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. Comments, questions? Okay. Moving on then.
The next one is an option that does involve taking on city responsibility for additional sidewalk kilometers. It is clearing regional road sidewalks. So city maintained responsibility for additional sidewalk kilometers, prioritizing assumed pedestrian travel along these corridors. And this is a model that the city of Cambridge has recently adopted.
And can you remind us, the City of Cambridge, they're not being reimbursed by the region to perform this service, are they?
Through you to yourself. I always find that one funny. As I understand it, the city has adopted that on their own and is not being reimbursed by the region, but I can certainly get clarification on that.
Thank you. Councillor Hamner.
Thank you, and thank you for that part. I think it would be important, because where we were talking about before, even if we do choose to look at prioritizing the school routes and the multi-use trails, there are a number of places that the regional roads and sidewalks are going to come into play. So again, we can't, what I want to see when it comes back is that whatever solutions we're coming up with, we're looking at holistic solutions, even if it has to be pockets of areas at times. I just worry if we are all across the entire city doing schools, but leaving out other parts of it.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Freeman.
I just had a question with regard to bylaw enforcement currently on regional roads. So I gather that if there's an infraction on a regional road, we probably get the first call, right? And then do we then route the call to regional bylaw and ask them to respond? Do we respond? Like, are we doing the region's work on this matter from a bylaw perspective?
Through you, Mayor McCabe, yes, the regional bylaw enforcement do not enforce on regional sidewalks.
There you go. Maybe.
Duly noted. Yeah, and I guess just going back to about 5 minutes ago when you were talking about the process that which the complaints come in, I think there was something in here about, or some conversation at some point about trying to see if there's a way to streamline some of that to make it easier for people, and B, make it easier for staff to sort through it and figure out what they are, right? And if there's some kind of technical technology that's out there that can be created to just help with that. I think that's part of what people are looking for as well.
Through you, Mayor McCabe. We are looking at all of those options in terms of the technological, but one thing we did hear from all of the focus groups is that desire at times to speak with a live person about it, especially if they're confused about where they maybe were, or not sure of the area, or not sure of the house address, because typically our system does require an address. The system is based on that. So that is something we've overwhelmingly heard, that it's challenging if you have encountered a sidewalk that isn't clear or an area that isn't clear. We made some improvements where you could enter multiple addresses, which is something that we heard back from previously. But again, there still is that desire to speak to, have extra staff after hours to be able to have that conversation and kind of guide people through it, because I think it's super helpful.
Councillor Bodley.
Sorry, through you, Mayor, super quick. I did just want to highlight that I think that the adoption of the AMPS program for sidewalk clearing would be extremely helpful, regardless of what we end up choosing here. I think that would also provide some of the ability for residents to have that conversation about, I was away, I did it 36 hours later, to give bylaw enforcement staff some leeway there. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Okay. Continuing on then.
The next option is around leveraging technology. So having internal vehicle tracking systems for some of those internal efficiencies and ensuring all routes are covered.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Councillor Bassett.
Thanks to you, Mayor. I just want to, when you're talking to Hamilton, they have a Hamilton sidewalk plow tracker. So just want to let you know that.
And I think the city of Kitchener does too, do they not? And maybe the region. I thought they did as well. Pardon? Yeah, and they named their plows, but. Okay, so number 10.
Number 10 is the additional support needed even after all of the equipment is in place to do this clearing. There's an ask for supporting cleanup crews. So the machine cleared windrows and crossings don't necessarily enable people to be able to reach the button to request the pedestrian crossing signal. So these crews would be in pickup trucks to do a last bit of hand shoveling necessary to provide that additional bit of access. And as well, they'd have an additional function to help bring salt to either the articulated loaders or the sidewalk plows that are out there, eliminating the need for those pieces of equipment to return to a central location to get more salt to complete their work.
Council comments, questions? Yep, go ahead, Councillor Wright.
Through you, Mayor, just a point of clarification. Are those the same crews that sometimes help people with their windrows? Or I'm thinking about the very last dump that we had, very, very heavy snow, where there were a number of people who were like, help, I can't get this cleared. And it was real. It was a very significant issue. And I did note that there were city staff coming out to help people, which was amazing and so appreciated.
We'll let Bob do that.
Thank you, through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Wright. This would be crews in addition to existing staff today. So they would be essentially employed to improve the efficiencies of the entire system.
Okay, any other comments, questions, sort of wrap up, if you want to, Councillor Hanmer?
Thank you. They may be going on to what's missing. Is that still to go? Okay.
Oh, sorry.
We'll wait for that.
Oh, sorry. I can't really see that part. Okay. So are we ready to move to the what's missing, Council?
Yes, so those are the 10 options that staff feel will address the 6 conclusions that were reached. And now this is an opportunity. There were some things that were considered and discarded by the working group. And this is our opportunity to hear from council. Again, focusing on ways to improve our current model under those 6 conclusions, what might have been missing from this list.
Thank you. Comment and a question, and I'll do it comment and a question. It's great to have all the 10 options of things to look at. It's a huge change. And I think when you bring it back, there's got to be some consideration around communication. And Carrie, looking specifically at you, for the first probably couple of years, what's it going to take in communication? We'd like to be proactive with it. So I think give some consideration to what realistically do we need to do there to keep it moving forward. It's one thing to get staff for the complaints process and extras to actually do the work, but if we're going to try to change some of these things, we'll need that component. And then my question is, what are the next 3 that you discarded?
I recall some things coming up in questions from council that we received. Bob, do you recall from the one email? There was, my apologies for putting you on the spot. I know that I wasn't part of the working group's discussion, so there was a wide variety of things that were looked at. Some of them were how they arrived at these options. Sorry, Bob.
Okay, I think one of the issues that we looked at and discarded was, if you can imagine, and it might be good if we can get a map up, but connecting the dots between locations where we currently service sidewalks and essentially, clearing all the locations in between or all the sidewalk in between. So if you can look at this map, and I don't know if we can zoom in, but you can see that there's various areas that we clear, and these are primarily either backlotted roadways or city-owned facilities. And so basically connecting dots in between where we're servicing. But this would be it would be quite the task to figure out how many kilometers this would add to the existing services that we provide. It would obviously have a huge impact on service times and fuel and emissions. It would require, we would have to figure out how many vehicles in terms of capital costs that we would have to acquire to be able to do this and to basically connect the dots. The other aspect that was problematic that we discussed was, if you clear one section of road and not another, it may, neighbors start seeing, why are they clearing my neighbor's road but not mine? And so it would lead to a bunch of questions and complaints about why we're not providing service here or there or wherever. So that was one of the big ones that we discussed. We felt we could get around that by concentrating efforts through the priority zones, and concentrating on perhaps regional roads that provided sidewalks, long lengths of sidewalks that certainly carried lots of pedestrians. That was one way we tried to address that. But it was certainly a logistical, I won't call it a nightmare, but a very logistical challenge to connect all the dots in between.
Thank you for that. What I think I heard you say is a little bit of how you prioritize to get to the 10 that you've got. And what I heard you say was consideration was given to service time and the response time. Consideration also being given to cost of doing all of it, whatever that threshold is going to be, and consideration being given to what we would prioritize and where our existing coverage is right now. And so it doesn't help Councillor Bodley and I in Ward 1 and 2 because we are further down on the list. However, it starts to make logical sense of what's the approach we're taking to prioritizing or coming up with the list of 10. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Hamner. Councillor Freeman.
Are we still on the what's missing piece? Because one of the things that I'm worried about is that the costing that we've shown here doesn't include everything. So we have a winter control reserve that we have on many of an occasion had to substantially dip into, and that creates a financial pressure for us. And you mentioned climate change, Councillor Wright, and it's very probable that, I just think we can't overlook the potential impacts to the reserve. One year, all municipalities pretty much ran out of salt because the salt mines weren't operational. One summer they were on strike, and we had substantive freeze-thaw cycles. And without salt, we couldn't even clear the roads. So how do we decide where to prioritize salt, for example, if we fundamentally change how much sidewalk clearing we were doing? Because we have minimum maintenance standards on the roads that have to be met no matter what. So that would suggest to me that we'd have to prioritize the roads over sidewalks no matter what. And then do we set an expectation that the broader citizens can walk away from clearing those roads because we said we were going to? So I just really worry about that in terms of how we manage these things. So we've had some pretty substantive dips into that reserve, and we've had to top it up. And so I don't want that to get overlooked. Some of the other questions that I had in terms of
Councillor, I just wanted to make sure what you just said, that you didn't want to leave the impression that people walked away from clearing roads, but you meant their sidewalk in front of their own.
Yeah, sidewalks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
sorry.
Just wanted to double check
because,
that.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you for that clarification. And then the other piece is like in this report, it kind of brings together some suggested tax increases, but please don't look at that in isolation to CPIX, which is the base that we need just to do what we do right now. And CPIX, I asked staff, it's trending around 5% right now. So if we were even to hold future over the next 3 years, our 3-year budget at a CPIX, that would be 5% per year over the next 3 years. And with these various service levels, you can see that increase is in addition to that. And the pieces around capital, those capital purchases, those would have to be front-ended. So again, if we're looking at a service change, we have to front-end that capital. So that tax increase would come right at the beginning of the 3-year budget. And again, it's quite overwhelming. And then I also think that when we consider financially, and I'm trying to just wear my finance chair hat for a moment, if you don't mind, when we start considering the resources, the tools that we have, the fiscal tools that we have to fund these programs, as much as I'd like to think there were other tools that we could dip in to fund it, other than the property tax base, there aren't. And we are advocating, I would say, at every level of government to open up opportunities for other fiscal tools, other tools for financing things, but we don't have any others. And so again, like who's at the greatest risk associated with 10 or 12% increase to try to change the service levels on site? Well, I'm including CPIX, front-ending capital, and then the annual operating costs. So in year one, it could be a 12% tax increase if we tried to do everything that was presented to us today. And that really scares me, because those that have the least are impacted the most by a decision like that. And so I'm just trying to, raise that as this additional piece to this report for council to think about as we give direction.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Councillor Freeman. Councillor Vasic. And I don't want to get into a debate about the budget right now. It's still around like what's missing. Yeah.
I appreciate that. I'm also just mindful that what's going to come out in the news tomorrow is concerns about a potential 12% increase to our taxes next year. So I don't want to, that's just a concern that I wanted to flag, to say that what we're being asked through this to do is to prioritize. So we're not actually being asked to eventually approve every single option, but to make an incremental change. So there would be a tax impact above CPIX, but it wouldn't get us to 12%. So I just wanted to balance that.
Yeah,
sorry, Councillor Freeman.
That's a good note to be mindful of. Yeah. Okay, anything else that people, yes, go ahead, Councillor Bodley.
I guess I don't know. We haven't really given broad comments here. I'm going to give a broad comment on the entire report here and just say that, truthfully, I was a little surprised at the cost for something that wasn't also entirely private sidewalk clearing at some level. I see, whether you're looking at 2.3, 3.7, 5.1, or anything in between there, I see that as sort of truthfully working in the margins of what some of the requests from the delegates who came forward to us asked that they're not, they asked us to look to places like Montreal. They asked us to look to places like Ottawa. They even reference Guelph and London, who do more than what's listed here. And we're not getting there regardless of what the tax number that Councillor Freeman referenced is. So I'm a little concerned about that, I guess. And so I'm just going to highlight like some of the priorities for me from my perspective. I think accessibility for everybody in the city should be the first priority that we look at when we're looking at this topic. I already referenced the school routes, so I'm not going to reference that again, but especially city responsibilities, sidewalks in school routes should be a priority. I really take issue with it. Somewhere in the report, it says something to the effect, and I may be paraphrasing here, suburbs are less of an issue than the uptown. Frankly, if we make that comment, we're essentially punting on asking kids to walk to school. Or we're punting on asking parents to take a stroller and walk their kids to school. So I just fundamentally disagree with that comment. I appreciate that in the uptown we have more density and more destinations, and I get that, and some prioritization makes sense. But to suggest that it's not an issue in the suburbs is wrong, in my opinion. Sorry.
We are going to go to a prioritization piece.
Yep, I got you.
Yeah, which is, I think, where you're going.
And kind of. So I wanted the windrows, which is another thing, and we're going to get to. But the thing I guess that I would reference, just to bring it back to the budget comment, is, you know, whenever we're looking at any of these big numbers, 2.3, 3.7, 5.1, I think what has happened in the past, and what happens in a lot of places when they're looking at adding a new service, because I don't think we should be looking at this as a tax increase. I understand that's where the funding comes from, but we're actually increasing the level of service for people. We're asking people to pay for more of something. I get where that comes from, but I think when you put a big number like this, a 5.1 number, it's essentially saying to council, that's too big. Nobody here is going to support that. And to Councillor Vasek's point, I really think we need to ask ourselves the question as council, when this does eventually come back to us, is sidewalk snow clearing, improved level of service, something that this council believes in fundamentally from an accessibility and an active transportation perspective? And if so, let's put some funding behind it, and let staff take what they've heard today from this workshop and tell us what the best way is for us to do that, whether that's 1% a year or 0.5% a year or whatever it happens to be, in the same way that we've made this commitment when it comes to our infrastructure deficit and asset management. So those are just my broad comments on the whole report.
Thank you, Councillor Bodley. Does anyone else have anything about the what's missing, or can we go to the prioritization? And then I think that's the last piece of this, correct?
It is. I will just note the one more piece under what's missing is we currently have the 2019 Deloitte report that did have a prioritization for incremental improvements to sidewalk snow clearing. And so the context of the report in front of you does not include the recommendations from that report. So that report itself continues, along with the information that's in our transportation master plan, plan to incrementally improve sidewalk accessibility and winter travel for anyone walking, rolling, cycling, all those different modes of travel. So that is another option that staff had been working towards up until this ask from council. The options in the report do not include citywide expansion of sidewalk snow clearing. We had a very specific mandate to look at improving our existing model. And I think it even maybe became a surprise to staff as we worked through this exercise, what costs would be associated to make our current responsibilities meet the expectations of the public that we've been hearing in terms of the issues that we've had.
Thank you for that, Carrie. That's helpful commentary. So we'll move to the prioritization piece then. Thank you.
Thank you. Clerks has a handout for everyone.
And I believe we're going to go dark on the on our YouTube channel just while council works on this piece. So we'll be back in about 5 minutes. 20 seconds. Okay, we are done. Okay, council, we're back, resuming. And so thank you very much, Carrie, Bob, and Nicole for, and the working, members of the working group, and members from the community who've already provided their input into this process. It's, as you can see, it's complicated and complex, and yeah, we're striving to do something, and we are constrained by many different elements, so including Mother Nature. So thank you very much for the work that you've put into this and the information and comments provided today, Council, and answers from staff.
On behalf of the working group, thank you. We know that was a lot to go through, but that's valuable information for us to take away. And now your ranking priorities will help inform some recommendations. So thank you again.
Thank you. And yep, Councillor Bassett.
Is it okay if I just add a few comments? Is that okay or not?
Well,
It's not okay?
Well, it's just that we're running into some real time constraints here. So I think council.
We're going to come back.
Yeah,
so.
This is not, yeah, so I was to say, this was not the final discussion we're going to have on this. And certainly comments, questions that you want to share either with council, with staff. I mean, this won't be coming back until the end of June, so there's still time to do that. So I'm looking for a mover and a seconder for the recommendation that's before us, which is, so moved by Councillor Freeman and seconded by Councillor Bodley. All in favor? And thank you again, staff, for putting this together for our consideration. So I will just turn the chair over briefly to Councillor Roach because of the late motion that I've provided. So over to you, Councillor Roach. Thank you.
Can I please have a mover and seconder to waive the time notice so that consideration can happen? I believe maybe let's go with the motion first, then we can have questions following that.
More on the timing and the necessity. Is there a necessity to have this today, or can we go through the normal motion timing process?
So go ahead.
Would you like to speak to that, Mayor?
Well, the timing of the urgency around this and the need to waive motion or waive the notice of motion is that the province is looking for input from municipalities by June 5th or 6th. So it was discussed. It's been on the ERO for about a month. Staff have worked with regional council and neighboring municipalities to go through it and to provide their comments to it. That's happening, and we discussed it at regional council on Wednesday. And so based on some of those conversations and a couple of delegations that came in, that's what then prompted this motion, because we've just had staff make their comments. So the timing is very compressed, but that's because the province's deadline is very compressed. So.
Thank you, Mayor. So can I please have a mover and a seconder to waive the time notice? Councillor Hanmer and Councillor Rowe. Mayor, please show of hands. It's carried. So, Mayor, I'll give you the opportunity to introduce the motion and speak to it.
So thank you very much, through you, Chair Roach. As I just said, the province has had this proposal to revise the provincial policy statement on the environmental registry, and the comments are input is due by June 5th. This is another piece of the planning changes that are coming from the province, and there are some significant concerns that staff noted, city staff as well as regional staff and staff in other municipalities. And elected officials in other municipalities have noted, particularly one of the my language would be egregious, is that they're looking to direct growth into settlement areas and proposing like estate-sized lots in areas of our rural community, which is in prime farmland. So, as someone said, or Kevin Eby was at the regional meeting the other day, and as former planner with the region of Waterloo, and said one of his planning mentors had said, let's not let the last crop from those lands be an estate lot. So with that, I don't want to belabor the point, but I'm asking for support to, through this motion and hopefully resolution, just add to our rural neighbors as well as the region and other municipalities and our staff's input to say we really have some problems with this provincial policy statement as drafted, and we're looking to the province to make some significant changes. Thank you.
Can I get a seconder to this motion? Councillor Rowe? Is there any discussion, questions, comments? Can I please have a show of hands in favor? Carried unanimously.
Thank you very much, and thank you, staff, for putting that together on short notice, and thank you to members of our community for continuing to provide their advocacy around this and other planning legislation that is continuing to be directed at municipalities. Thank you. So I'll resume chairing the meeting. Communications and correspondence, seeing none. Any unfinished business, seeing none. Questions? I know Councillor Freeman had indicated she has a couple questions.
Yes, thank you, through you, Mayor McCabe. So I'm having a challenge in one of the public parks in my ward with an individual practicing axe throwing. I understand that in talking, well, I'll just turn it over to the Director of Bylaws. She can provide what's in our bylaw right now, but my recommendation would be that my hope would be that we can give some staff direction to actually modify the bylaw slightly to expressly prohibit axe throwing in our park. In all honesty, in addition to it being absolutely terrifying to the neighbors nearby, this individual has chosen to use one of our trees, a very mature tree, as a target. And so that tree has been fundamentally damaged by all of this. And Waterloo Region Police, we're following up with them, but I think it will help if our bylaw is more explicit.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor McCabe. Thank you, Councillor Freeman. Just for clarification, within the Parks bylaw, there are certain prohibitions. Namely, I'll just list off a couple. Number 7, it indicates it's a prohibition to interfere with park property. 9, to engage in the conduct that endangers the health and safety of himself, herself, or others. And then we do specify within the park bylaw, there is the practice of archery and discharging a crossbow or bow, but axe throwing itself isn't specified. My perception would be that the axe throwing could fall under the engage in the conduct that endangers the health and safety of himself, herself, or others. But certainly welcome to suggestions that specifically looking at axe throwing being added as well.
Yeah, so I would like to move direction to staff to modify the bylaw to expressly prohibit axe throwing. I think this individual would identify that they aren't endangering anyone because they are very skilled at axe throwing. So, and indeed, the tree is evident that the target appears to have never been missed. But it's very, very concerning to me, so I would like to move that direction.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. Councillor Bassett?
Sorry, I know this should be a given and everyone's laughing, so it should be a given. I also don't want people throwing axes in the park and shooting bow and arrows. I guess my question, though, is I don't know who this individual is, and I feel a bit uncomfortable adapting a bylaw for a specific individual doing something when there could be considerations that I don't know about. They could be a resident in the neighborhood completely. I guess what I'm getting at is this person neurodivergent in some way? Are they? We don't know. And so I am also hearing staff say that the current bylaw kind of does what you need it to do in order to ask the person not to throw an axe. And so I just feel uncomfortable about putting something in when I have no idea the context at this time.
I'm happy to then just ask for a briefing note so we can get some more information.
That would be excellent, yes.
And I mean, many people have had conversations with the individual. They're very approachable. They just truly believe they aren't putting anyone's safety at risk.
Right, and the safety is for sure first and foremost, but I also just, if the bylaw already kind of makes it possible for staff to do what they need to do, then we both have the safety consideration kind of attended to, and then we can see if we need to very specifically put in axe throwing.
The only comment I would make to that is somebody at some point thought that, what was the rest of it? Crossbow and archery needed to be explicitly stated. So,
that's what,
I don't know what the context was around that, but...
And if everyone's comfortable with voting, you can go ahead and put that. I'm not stopping you from putting it on the table. And if you all want to vote for it, that's fine. So just to say, it's whatever you feel comfortable doing.
Nicole has a comment.
Sorry, through you, Mayor McCabe, to all of council. There is also a provision I didn't mention about damaging trees and so forth that's in there as well. So looking, and certainly I can follow up with some other municipalities and look at other bylaws to see if it is challenging to list every activity because there's always things that could come up, and maybe there's a better way to frame sort of the general prohibition as well. So certainly can look into that and see what best practice may be.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind doing it as a briefing note, I think that's fine. I think that's still direction to staff, though, to do that work, to provide a briefing note. Is that okay? Do I have a seconder to provide that direction?
Councillor Bodley is seconding that. All in favor? That is unanimous.
Great.
Okay,
I suspect the other ones are there because they're actually listed as a weapon in a weapons list somewhere, but that would be great. So the other question that I have is that in just the past month, the City of Kitchener has modified their bylaw associated with on-street parking to permit what they refer to as boulevard parking, which is parking within that apron at the end of a driveway. And so I've been asked by individuals in my ward if I could raise this to council's attention to see if this is something we'd like to get more information from staff on, whether it's, and it only is my understanding of the City of Kitchener bylaw is it only permits boulevard parking for the summer months. So it lists it as like April to I think October or something like that, but I wanted to throw it out there. Like, I think I'd like to get some more information on it because
So are you looking for
ticketed.
like a briefing note, or did you want to put this on the agenda for staff to come back and have a broader conversation about this?
I think I'd like staff's advice because they might want to do some research. And so I'm thinking a briefing note might be a starting point, and then
So Commissioner Ormson.
Through you, Mayor, to Councillor Freeman. Thanks for raising it, Councillor Freeman. And we're aware of some pilot work that's been done in other municipalities about this issue. And we'd be happy to generate a briefing note and get back to council on it. I will say, just as far as preliminary thoughts on it go, there are some serious safety risks with that type of parking, especially with car doors opening into either bike lanes or into sidewalks. There's also been a number of sightline issues raised with respect to small children that dart out on the driveway apron onto the roadway or sidewalk. And I can tell you, there will be some cautionary notes in that response to council, just for full awareness about the risks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Does that work?
Is anyone else interested in that information? Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So,
okay. Do we need a motion?
It's still direction to ask staff to do work
so
on it.
Moved
So
by
I'm happy to
Councillor
move
Freeman,
direction.
seconded by Councillor Hamner. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, through Mayor. I just want to highlight, if possible, in this briefing note, and I not to suggest that it wouldn't have, but if we could look at this through an equity lens as well too, because the homes, from my understanding of the Kitchener bylaw, very few homes actually can do this where the car is not overlaying on the grass. Like, they have very specific rules around who can do this. And my interpretation would be that by allowing it broadly, people aren't going to read those rules. They're going to park there. They're still going to get ticketed. And then we've got this equity issue when it comes to, smaller homes, smaller boulevards, smaller aprons. They can't do it. But folks who have large estate homes, they can park, 2 or 3 more cars in their giant apron. So I'm just hoping that in this briefing note, there could be that lens brought to it if possible.
Through you, Mayor McCabe, to Councillor Bodley, absolutely, we can consult Sanjay's team on that aspect of it for certain. Yeah.
Good note. Thank you. Okay, so with that then, all in favor? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Councillor.
Through you, Chair. I actually just wanted to make a comment, and I'm glad that Councillor Freeman brought this up, because I'm hearing about this also from an affordability housing issue where adults are living at home with their parents and multiple cars. It's becoming an issue, and I've been approached in my neighborhood, just as an example, and then staff can take that information as well, where there's 4 adults living in a home and they work out of town, whatever, different times of day, but they're all trying to park in the driveway. So tickets are happening and people are getting frustrated. So this at least would provide one option, perhaps to deal with that situation as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So did you have another comment? Okay. All in favor then? We could, if we need to bring this back for a more fulsome discussion at council, we can certainly do that. So are you voting, Councillor Roach, or did you have a question? Okay. All in favor then? That is carried. Thank you very much. Any other questions? No. Just new business. One of the things I'd like to make note of, you may have noticed my super cool t-shirt. That's written in Elvish. So I was really, really honored to attend the Care Never Stops rally on Saturday night, and just want to do a shout out to the chair of the Grand River Board, who happens to also be Councillor Hamner, and President and CEO Ron Gagnon, and the chair and president of the foundation, who did an absolutely phenomenal job with their with the event on Saturday, and provided these T-shirts, and the goal that they are reaching. For the fundraising goal, they're reaching to raise $250 million, which is, I think, the biggest ask we've ever had in our community. But they're closing in on that, so just shout out to them and the performance they put on, and to Ian Cook, who is familiar to us, who pledged to him and his family to match donations raised that evening or coming out of that evening. So that was a really generous and phenomenal donation, as well as some of the other donations that have come. So if you would like to get a super cool t-shirt like mine that's written in Elvish, you can get it in Klingon, you can get it in, I think, Arabic, English, French, Portuguese. Yeah, so lots of ways to support our hospital. So thank you. So well done, and thank you. Any other new business anyone wants to? Yes.
3 excellent things by the Lincoln Heights neighborhood group. Last weekend they had a neighborhood-wide garage sale. I wasn't able to attend, which is very sad because I love garage sales. And upcoming, they're doing a letter writing workshop with a Toronto artist about who writes love letters to the city, and she's published a children's book about as much, and she's coming to the neighborhood at Rosalie Park on June 10th. June 17th, they're also hosting a movie night in the park, which is excellent. And of course, last weekend was KW's Famous's Vintage Fest in St. Jacobs, which was a really nice thing to do on the long weekend. And do you want me to leave it to you, Councillor Bodley? Well, Councillor Bodley took it was such a sad weekend for me not to be here. But the Button Factory has finally, after many years of advocacy, gotten an elevator, and Councillor Bodley was there to open it with some community members, the staff, and the board of directors. So very exciting, and more to come from the Button Factory.
Yes, and thank you to previous council, including those around the table, for getting that investment needed, the funding needed for that. So that, yeah, that is really fantastic. Okay, enactment of bylaws. Need a mover? Councillor Freeman, seconder, Councillor Vassic, all in favor? That is carried. Adjournment. Councillor Hamner, moved by Councillor Rowe, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.